Welcome to KUMO-AUDIOBOOK, Chapter 21 to 35. A Clueless Fool's View. Subaru was in a surprisingly good mood. Maybe it was not all that surprising, he was Subaru after all. If the world gave him no reason to smile, then he would invent one. But for any other person it would have been impossible to feel happy in this moment. He was injured, his head felt like it would explode in a few minutes, and the curse that had been placed on him would kill him in a few hours. Nonetheless, he couldn't help himself but feel thankful. He had done it. Finally. After 13 loops to get here, he had managed to save both the children and REM at long last. He did not want to see them dead again. He would not know, could not look into their unseeing eyes knowing that he had failed them. Now they would live. Now they were safe. Because he had saved them. He had been useful. He, Subaru Natsuki, a helpless loser from another world, had saved them. Wasn't that the best feeling in the world? Hopefully this would be enough to repay Amelia's kindness. Only a complete angel would take in a suspicious stranger like him and give him a job. Amelia was the best. It had been disheartening to hear that she would leave the manor so soon after they only got to spend a few days together, but his terrible luck allowed him to relive these 4 days again and again, so he had been able to learn much about her. In general he had learned so much, and that was also something he was grateful for. Repeating loop after loop had made sure that he could now read much of the written language of this kingdom. He also knew the layout of the mansion perfectly, and he was able to cast magic. Magic! He could do magic. How awesome was that? Even though it was an ancient truth that all heroes who got transported into New World received unbelievable and unmatched magic powers, it was still exciting to experience it firsthand. Well, he got another superpower already, but it kinda sucked. Return by death was cool and all, but it really hurt. It really did. Distracting himself from his gloomy thoughts, he idly scratched his bandages and wondered who the blonde girl on the other side of the table was. She had introduced herself as Tanya von de Guchaff, which sounded like a comparatively normal name for this crazy world, but her eyebrow had noticeably twitched when he had called her Nazi Loli, and that confused him. Her attire really reminded him of an old German uniform, and she held herself in a rather stoic and rigid way that suggested that she was not up for fun or light-hearted banter. That's where the Nazi part of the joke came in. He honestly hadn't meant it as an insult. The lowly part arose obviously from her short stature and her pretty, doll-like face. Her appearance was not unlike Biko, now that he thought about it. And in the few days that she knew him he already managed to worm his way into her heart. He was sure of it. So why not try to befriend this Tanya Loli too? She couldn't be much more of a tsundere than Beatrice. Or Ram maybe. That much was for certain. But all that was not important, because she had understood at least in part what he had been talking about, which should be impossible for anyone from this world. Both the word Nazi as well as Loli were entirely unknown here. If Biko, the girl that spent all her time indoors reading, not unlike him, could not recognize the sacred description of Loli, then nobody here could. Nazis were also not present in this world if he was not mistaken, so how had she understood the meaning of his silly joke? Maybe he was just imagining things. It would only be natural for him to become paranoid from dying so much after all. Or he had simply interpreted too much into a meaningless reaction. Biko had also answered his words that she did not know with reactions of surprise and irritation. That was what made her so fun to tease. Still, she was another candidate and rival of his lovely Amelia, so he would approach her with caution. But who knew? Maybe they could ally their camps. From what Puck had told him, Amelia seemed rather lonely. That was absolutely undeserved for a heavenly being like her. More friends would be good for her, she deserved to be happy. Tanya appeared nice enough. Certainly more so than Ram. The pink-haired maid was his trusted and unsurpassed benchmark for meanness. Subaru was so deep in thought about all the different ways in which he could make his Amelia happy that he had not realized how intensely he was staring at the object of his desire. Subaru. Is something the matter? Are you feeling unwell? Do you need to rest? No. Of course not, Amelia Tan. Your adorable face was just distracted me with its unmatched magnificence. I could lose myself in your eyes for hours. All females at the table except Rem shot him a withering glare. Ram even scoffed, and he would swear that he could hear her say something about pervert Barusu having no shame, or something like that. Amelia just blushed at the compliment. Tanya asked, honesty is an admirable trait to have, but are you always this straightforward? Well, I am an open book. I think the world would be a better place if anybody would just admit to their feelings. The cute, but not as cute as Biko, blonde continued to look at him with a slightly raised eyebrow, and an incredulous look in her eyes like she couldn't believe his words. So naturally in his role as Subaru Nasuki, fool extraordinaire, he had to explain it to her. You see, it only hurts those closest to you if you keep your emotions closed up all the time. See Rem, for example, she always felt inferior to her sister even though that is totally wrong and unfounded. For years she resented herself, for no good reason, although her sister would probably never encourage such a thought. I have only known Ram for a few days, but I am certain that she loves her twin with all her heart, and would never think of her as lesser than herself. Therefore not only did she hurt herself by never admitting her feeling, but also her sister, who would not like her thinking like that. Ram watched with wide eyes and began to turn to her sister with clear shock written in her face. Oops. He hadn't meant to expose family secrets like that. Hopefully she wouldn't be too mad at him for telling the truth, but it had to be said. And it would make things easier for Rem to explain in private. Hopefully. It is true, sister. I never intended for you to be hurt by this, but I knew that I could never be as good or as talented as you. I'm sorry, I should have told you. Ram threw him a dirty look that promised a confrontation later on. Oh joy. Rem, why are you speaking such nonsense? The only person that could even hope to surpass me in the quality of her work and her overall adorableness would be you. I am not saying this as your loving sister, although I will always be that, but from an objective point of view. Even a complete idiot like Barusu is able to see your greatness. I already told you, Rem, that I mean it when I said you are wonderful. I have never seen you as a replacement, or a substitute for your sister. We all like you just for who you are. It seems as wonders can still happen, because I sadly find myself agreeing with Moran over there. We will take about this tonight. Don't worry. Thank you. Sniveled a emotionally distraught Rem. Oh myyyyyy, how unfortunate, said the clown. Regardless of how many good things Rosewell had done for him, Subaru couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with the man. A sinister aura was surrounding him that made him hard to trust. What art and three interesting issue that we will hopefully be able to resolve soon. Nonetheless, do some of us more pressing matters to discuss. Lady de Guerchaf, a word please. That damned clown was planning something. He knew it. Note, Rosewell sus. Chapter 22 Suspicious Demands. Tanya's fellow reincarnate was an idiot. That was the only possible conclusion after his outburst at the dining table. Or he played his part so masterfully that he was indistinguishable from a real one. Whatever the case, she would need to keep an eye on him. Fools or manipulators like him were the most dangerous variables on a battlefield, because you could never predict their actions. They were either not driven by reason or followed plans so insidious that escaping them was barely possible. The best comparison to a person like Subaru Natsuki would be a stray, wrong-triggered grenade that could explode in the most unexpected way at any moment. Truly an unpleasant factor to plan around. If the boy came under her employ, and he would, of that she had no doubts, then she would to drill this behavior out of him. To keep him on a tight leash would be necessary not only for his own well-being, but also to protect the otherworldly secrets that he possessed. Luckily he seemed quite taken by Amelia, which would make it hopefully a little easier to properly break him in. Under the pretense that his work would benefit his lady, he could be motivated rather well. At least his loud-mouthed carelessness would reveal many valuable details about the inhabitants of the mansion. With his unknowing help he had already painted a fairly comprehensive picture of the two twin maids of this place. Tanya had already seen many different demi-humans, but the strange hair colors of Ludnica were hard to accept. Blue and pink. How was that even biologically possible? And honestly, who thought that giving two nearly identical-looking girls with nearly identical-sounding names was a good idea? Rosewall was even weirder. She knew from spying on him through his window that he could speak without the ridiculous accent, and he was certainly not an ugly man under all the layers of makeup. So it made no sense to her why he added it in the first place. Did he want to stand out from the crowd? To make him more special? If so, then that's unbelievably stupid. He was already the most powerful magician in the country. Now he wanted to talk to her, which was to be expected. Tanya had not come here as a vacation after all. What she had not predicted was the urgency of his request. Discussing political matters with her now directly after she had arrived at his estate appeared unnecessarily tactless and rude. He must have gotten a pretty good reason then to warrant such a diplomatic blunder. The game was turning serious. How long would you like to stay in this wonderful home of mine? Tanya blinked. Slowly. And blinked again. That was what he wanted to discuss. What? 6 days at least. If relationships between and Lady Amelia and I prosper, then I could imagine a few days more than that. As lovely as this mansion is, Lord Rosewall, I fear a longer stay would be unwise, seeing as I have my own business to attend to back in the capital. She had to train her 204th after all. There was no time to waste. Nonetheless, would the stay here hopefully teach her much about this world's magic and other hard-to-find secrets. I am overjoyed that you have taken such a liking to my property, but I must sadly inform you that you will have to leave in exactly 5 days. And why is that, if I am allowed to ask? In 5 days I am going on some important errands, and it would be unforgivably rude of me in my role as your host to leave you alone here, he grinned. The lie was so obvious that Tanya felt insulted by his bluntness. Sadly, there was not much she could do about it. Maybe if she fed the ground dragons poisoned fodder, then she would be unable to depart. No, resistance was not worth it in this case. 5 days would have to be enough for her to sway Amelia and eventually Rosewall to her side. If that is what you propose, then who am I not to honor your wishes, Lord Rosewall? I shall depart in 5 days if you so choose. She placed great importance on the fact that he was making her do this to remind him that she did not appreciate his demeanor. What was this man planning? What would happen in 5 days? Was that a trap? Was he planning an ambush? Excellent. Now, if you could please enlighten me. What exact reason do I have to thank for your visit? Amelia was rather tight-lipped yesterday about the nature of your planned alliance. Saying the truth would be detrimental at this stage, but lying would cost her much trust later on. Naturally, she chose the path in the middle. Half-truths and logically sound distractions that could not easily be refuted would probably be enough to satiate the Margrave's curiosity. I suggested for Lady Amelia to unite our camps to boost her popularity and help achieve our mutual goals far easier. As you may know, I intend for this country to flourish and grow regardless if I become queen or not, so I am sure that me and Lady Amelia will be able to find a lot of common ground. I also would be willing to offer her my vast experience on tactics and political schemes as a counselor of sorts. The world is a dangerous place, and more preparation for perilous situations would certainly do her some good. And what would you get of the deal? Now came the tricky part. If she demanded too much, she would seem arrogant, and if she demanded not enough, then that make her look suspicious. That is what I have come to determine with Lady Amelia over the course of the next week, but I already have a few details in mind. For example, as a man with huge magical prowess, in all 6 elements no less, you surely knew of the value of knowledge. Information is the most precious thing in the world, and as such interests me greatly. I had already the pleasure of stumbling over your library, and I would be more than happy to visit it again with your permission. The Forbidden Library is indeed a spectacular place, but you will have to speak with Beatrice about using it for your purposes. She is the protector of all of its contents, and has the sole authority over this place. That only strengthened her theory about Beatrice not being a human. No one in their right mind would entrust a place as important as the Forbidden Library to a little girl. Why was it called forbidden anyway? Whatever was hidden inside must be extremely secretive to be hidden away like that. She needed to talk with Beatrice again. Then I will do that. Would that be all you wanted to talk about? Yes, quite. Enjoy your stay. Tanya felt relief and unease in equal measure when she heard his answer. Relief, because he had swallowed the bait, and would hopefully ask not too many questions in the next few days, and unease, because his menacing grin seemed to indicate that he knew more than he let on. What a strange man. He was planning something, but she was not sure what. Maybe she would need to eliminate him in the near future. Chapter 23 Spiritual Acquaintance. She wanted to immediately go and speak with Beatrice, but she cautiously refrained from doing so. Her urge to finally learn more about elemental magic was strong, but it would be unwise to bother the librarian so soon after they had just met for the first time. The not-quite-human girl seemed to prefer silence and loneliness, as expected from someone who guarded a library without many visitors. Instead, she would use the rest of this day to get closer to Amelia and her servant Subaru. Even though both gave off a naive and immature appearance, they were integral to her plans. The half-elf, because she was a rival and ideal scapegoat for Tanya's future misdeeds, and the probably Japanese boy, because his knowledge could potentially augment her own, and was too dangerous to be controlled by anyone else other than her. After 16 years of steady memory loss, she had sadly forgotten many achievements of the modern world, and his help would surely prove invaluable in recovering the wisdoms of more enlightened times. The first on her mental list was Amelia. Consulting with her servant before her could be misunderstood as an affront, or even treachery. It would simply not do to speak with Subaru after they had just met at the dining table. The problem was just that she had no clue where the silver-haired half-elf was at the moment. When Tanya left Rosewell's bureau, the whole mansion appeared deserted. Where was everybody? A partial answer to this question revealed itself when she spotted both people she wanted meet outside on the front lawn. How unbecoming of a royal candidate. Was Amelia not aware of how that looked? Lazing around on the bare ground with peasant no less. Tanya hurried to the front door, and didn't even bother to spy on their conversation, because the stupid grin on Subaru's face told her that it could not possibly be something important. How fortunate to find you both here. Am I interrupting something? No, stuttered a faintly red-faced Amelia. Yes, came Subaru's unsurprisingly shameless reply. His lack of tact did not compel him in the slightest to hide his indignation. He undoubtedly lacked all forms of self-restraint. Tanya chose to ignore his childish scorn in favor of focusing on the more important member of their little group. Very well. I chose this moment to say thank you for your hospitality. We have known each other for little more than a few days, and you have already invited me into your home. For that I am grateful, and I appreciate the sign of your trust. Oh, think nothing of it. This alliance could help us both immensely. It is just common decency to show you how I live if you have done so as well. Wonderful. She had taken the bait again. To that I agree. Good friends are far trickier to make than bitter enemies. On a different note, how much do you trust your servant here? This was a perfect opportunity to observe how close these two really were. With luck, both had feelings to each other that would make them predictable and easier to use. If you knew what somebody wanted and how much they wanted it, then you could dictate the price for the object of their desire confidently. Rather well. I mean, we met only a few days ago, and I don't know too much about him. For a brief instant Subaru's eyes revealed a deep hurt and sorrow within them. Was he delusional and expected Amelia to return his unrealistic feelings of affection after only a few days? Or was there something deeper at play here? The silver-haired girl continued, but he has already done a great service to me by protecting the village, and I believe that he has a pure and honest heart, even if he is a bit silly at times. He dramatically gripped his chest and loudly proclaimed, my heart melts from Amelia Tan's kindness. It's just too much. Tanya only raised an eyebrow. If her recruits had displayed such behavior, they would gotten latrine duty for a month. How did Amelia expect to be taken seriously with subordinates like that? Then I guess he can stay during our little conversation. Although I would advise you to not bring him to our first round of negotiations tomorrow. He would certainly lighten the mood, but his presence would otherwise be unneeded. Hey. Of course. What have you come here to talk about? Said Amelia in an amateurish attempt to sound businesslike. The poor girl had no experience with things at all. She must have had insane luck to be found by Tanya, or else even a toddler could have taken advantage of her. Tanya would do that as well, but at least she would do so with both their best interests in mind. Manipulation was only unethical if it benefited just one party after all. I wanted to learn a bit more about you. I showed you some of my memories at the royal selection, so I thought it would only be fair if you told me about your past as well. This was a bold move that unfortunately seemed to leave no positive effect on the girl. A problematic childhood was the likely reason if she interpreted the reluctant dissatisfaction on Amelia's face correctly. Maybe she could use this trauma against her. Psychological warfare was the best. Probably because no means of production or infrastructures got damaged by it. You don't have to go into much detail if you don't want to. Our past is not always pleasant to talk about. I know that better than anyone. By appearing sympathetic to her tragic backstory, she would hopefully appear similar to the naive girl, what in turn would lead her to feel a sense of camaraderie at their shared suffering. Pity was not something Tanya usually wanted, but now it would aid her well in acquiring trust. Well, I already told you that I come from the Elia forest that was frozen. When I awoke there I remembered only very little of my time before I was frozen, so I can't actually tell you much. But it was at this moment that I met Puck for the first time, and we formed a contract. Puck? Oh, yes. I forgot that you have not met him already. He is my contracted spirit. She tapped the gem on her necklace a few times and suddenly a small, grey cat floated out it. A cat. A spirit cat. What the hell? Magic here was so ludicrous. Leah, what is it? I was dreaming so peacefully right now. Sorry Puck, but I wanted you to introduce yourself to Tanya here. Hi. I'm Puck. Leah's protector and cutest spirit around. I hope you don't try anything unsavory towards her, or I will have to intervene, cheered the cat even though his voice took on a more sinister quality at the end. Yeah, don't even bother to try anything, because he can read your emotions. She had to suppress a smile. Subaru, the glorious idiot, had gifted her with another piece of invaluable information. Had she been left in the dark about Puck's abilities, then she would have made a potentially fatal mistake while negotiating. Now she could plan around that and prepare herself. This guy was helping her more than Amelia, it seemed. Because the mind-reading spirit had gotten in the way of her plans, she directed the chat into safer territories. A meaningless conversation of pleasantries and humorous anecdotes ensued, which hid her true intentions well. This cat really was a nuisance. Half an hour later and Tanya excused herself to practice the techniques Reinhard had shown her for her sword training. She had no doubt that she could already kill pretty effectively with her cutlass, but more finesse never hurt. It proved also to be a decent enough method to kill time. As the evening progressed she made sure to send her driver back home, with a message to Reinhard that detailed that she would be returning home in exactly 5 days. This served as a safety measure to ensure that he knew if something unexpected happened to her. Should she arrive too late, then he would with a bit of luck be already on his way to meet her or search for her. Rosewall was not trustworthy, and who knew what he may have planned for her. So she was very happy when one of the maids accidentally overheard her conversation with the messenger, so that she could report those words back to her master. If Rosewall knew that the Sword Saint awaited her return, then he would definitely not dare to ambush her during the journey. Chapter 24. A Maid's Feelings. REM felt conflicted about the new guest of Lord Rosewall. Tanya von de Guerchaff reeked of the unholy witch's odor that clung to Subaru as well. A week ago she would have tried to kill her for being a follower of the witch's cult, but the newly appointed butler had shown her that the foul smell alone was no indication of ill will. In fact, REM felt extremely guilty for mistrusting Subaru so much during the first few days, even though he obviously just wanted to help. Now her opinion of the young man had shifted dramatically. Yes, he was weak and reckless and a little bit silly, but that was unimportant to her. She could see deeper than the superficial layers he surrounded himself with. Underneath his sometimes slightly off-putting exterior lay a heart full of courage and love and a fierce protectiveness that reminded her of her sister. The first thing he had done after pushing her out of harm's way and taking the brunt force of the attack was asking if she was all right. He had dragged one of the children out of the forest, while his left arm had nearly been ripped off, and had tried to simultaneously put up a smile to tell her that everything was going to be fine even though it clearly wasn't. Had Lady Beatrice not extraordinary healing powers, then he would have probably lost the appendage for good. He still had to wear bandages after excessive treatment for Dragon's sakes. And everything he had done was to protect her and the village children, who he had barely known at all. Such compassion and valor had to be admired. The look of pure bliss in his eyes when she had told him that everybody was safe had made her own heart skip a beat. Those scary eyes of his had never looked so inviting. Only sister had ever cared for her that much. For a foolish, undeserving, selfish rem. If he knew how inferior to Ram she was, then he most likely would never look at her the same way again. She didn't want that though. Actually, she wouldn't mind if he looked more at her. Oh, how selfish she was. That was at least what she had initially thought, but now she wasn't so sure anymore. Subaru had explained to her in great detail why he liked her, even preferred her to her sister. How was that possible? She was just a worse version of Ram. But this incredible boy had assured her that that was not the case. For him she was stronger and more capable, and cuter, than sister. Rem couldn't possibly describe the feelings of joy and unexpected relief that flood her being. In this moment she vowed to pay back her debt to Subaru Natsuki. She would be there for him and stand at his side in every situation. He was the light that lifted the darkness, which had suffocated her life until this point. This gift of hope for the future was priceless, and could only be repaid with her life. He was her hero. So, if an unassuming, clumsy boy like him could capture her heart despite his hideous scent, then she would give Tanya the same chance. Stupid prejudices would lead her nowhere. Ram would not make this mistake twice. Puck on the other hand was as tense as when Rosewall had first showed up in the Elia forest. This Tanya girl was up to no good. He could feel it. Something sinister was hidden behind these shining blue eyes, and it would affect Emilia. She was dangerous. Her mind had been confusing to say the least. Unlike most people who felt only one or two emotions at a time, she had layers. He didn't know how to explain it really, but all the normal emotions that filled regular people's heads were somehow dulled or suppressed by a thick, grey blanket of indifference. It appeared like she reacted only inwardly, but smothered these feelings before they could control her thoughts. At least sometimes, because on rare occasions some emotions would slip through the barrier only to be held back mere moments later. To have such self-control at a lower age than his daughter was impressive and disconcerting. Tanya knew how not to react on impulses and always operate in a way that suited her goals. It was cold and inhuman, and Puck didn't like that. Especially if this person tried to form an alliance with Emilia. She would no doubt use his wonderful Leah to ruthlessly further her own goals while pretending to care for her, and that was unacceptable. The strangeness didn't end there, however. When Puck used all his power to look as deep as he could into her soul, he found two seemingly foreign powers cling to it. One was the purplish-black miasma of the witch that hung over Subaru, as well, and the other was kind of the exact opposite. It was an aura of blinding gold and white that smelt faintly of burning incense and roses. The scent was not unpleasant, but became quickly overwhelming the longer he examined it. If the theory hadn't sounded so ludicrous, then he could have sworn that the weird light tried to purge all imperfections from what it touched, like it represented pure holiness. Was it a curse? In his 400 years he had never seen such a curse though. And what did the witch's scent signify? Subaru had it on him, and he was certainly not a cultist. If Tanya did not come from this world like his daughter had said, then she was probably also not one. But two people showing up with the exact same unnatural attribute was highly suspicious. Wait a minute. Both the scary-eyed boy and Tanya had shown up roughly a week ago, and stunk that way. Subaru was surprisingly unknowing about a lot of basic things in Lugnica, and he openly admitted to being not from anywhere they would recognize, which was a very odd thing to say. Could it be that he was not from this world as well? He talked strange, his mannerisms were even stranger, and he was so naive that it was a wonder he had survived thus far. It seemed like a logical conclusion. If the witch's miasma was a sign of otherworldly travel, and that would explain this phenomenon quite well. But was the witch bringing these people here? For what reason? Nothing good could come of this if the jealous witch wanted them here. Her plans would bring only evil and destruction to the world as they had 400 years ago. Puck honestly considered if he should kill them both to prevent anything bad from happening to Amelia. The problem with that would only be that Leah would lose her closest, and only, friend and a valuable ally as well. No other noble or candidate had expressed even the smallest desire to work with her, and his unfortunate child would need all the help she could get to achieve her dream. Maybe Tanya truly could help with that. Nonetheless, he would definitely keep an eye on her. Chapter 25 Finding a Library. Dinner was a rather dull experience for Tanya. Everything had been vastly complicated by the revelation that Amelia's spirit could read emotions and likely detect lies. This changed her complete approach for subtle information gathering and manipulation. Every word that she uttered and expression that she displayed had to be genuine, which made the process so much slower. Still, not all was lost. Tanya was lucky that 16 years of being ex-s cruelty had not been able to dull her heart, or turn her into a raving fanatic. If anything, her many losses and victories had shown her what she had lacked in her first life as a salaryman. The memories were fuzzy and distant, but she remembered that she had no real friends or colleges that she was genuinely proud of. There had been no people she was glad to have met, that she would cherish. Her first life had also lacked a true fulfillment. Yes, she had worked good and hard and earned a fine pay, but what had she ever truly accomplished? What was left of her after her untimely demise at the hands of a vengeful co-worker? No, money and status alone did not make happy. Her beloved battalion had brought her no such things, and she had still felt content when spending time with them. When it not rained bullets and grenades, or the unforgiving weather drenched her to the bones or froze her fingers off, then the presence of her comrades had made her feel cheerful. She had trained them, molded them, forged them into unbreakable beasts of flesh and iron, and that made her proud. Together they had taken on the impossible and won. They all were connected through a bond that ran deeper than any family ever could. They had bled together, cried and despaired together, and come out on top. In this moment Tanya missed them all so dearly like never before in her life. True happiness could not be bought with money or riches. It had to be earned by accomplishing the goals that you set out for yourself in the world, no matter the cost. And it had to be done together with and for the people that were precious for you. After opening her heart during the fires of war, she could never imagine to go back to the narrow-minded, hyper-focused state of her initial career. The world was a bigger place than just numbers that dictated the most rational decisions every time, because otherwise there would be no room to simply live. All her hard work had to amount to something other than a nice pension and a paid-off house. So, it was possible to say that the Great War had not killed off Tanya's compassion, but rather awakened it. She still would not foolishly trust somebody she just met, or actively search for a person to form an emotional connection with, but she was no longer opposed to the idea. If it served not only her work, but also her happiness, then she would not resist. Her survival was still her utmost priority. Her thoughts were not solely controlled by that, however. Allowing herself to care for Amelia for that matter was not that difficult, because it not only felt good, but was also a logical decision. The young half-elf had many qualities to be admired, like her friendliness and empathy that made her pleasant to talk with and could be guided to produce a more secure and less naive young woman. With enough time Tanya would make a shining star out of the girl, she was sure of it. She had to be sure to convince Puck that she had no ill intentions. Feeling genuine emotions was the only way to deceive him. Damn it, forcing feelings was hard. After the rather awkward meal she had the goal to find a book about yin magic in the Forbidden Library, but remembered too late that it was apparently protected by a bizarre door-crossing spell that switched its placement in the mansion randomly. Seeing as she couldn't just open every door in the whole building to find the correct one, she asked one of the maids for help. "Excuse me, but would you happen to know a way to access Lady Beatrice's library?" "No, milady, I do not. But Subaru has a strange talent of finding her whenever he wishes to. You should ask him for advice." Asking him led to the boy striking an embarrassing pose and proclaiming that he alone commanded the eldritch power of summoning Biko. She hoped he was joking. "And there she is," screamed the fool while seemingly opening a door at random, which indeed revealed the forbidden library. His alleged ability appeared to be real, which brought Tanya to the dreadful conclusion that she would have to ask Subaru more for his help in the future. Why couldn't someone competent and professional like these two different colored maids divine the location of this place? It would make the whole affair that much more bearable. Beatrice arguably agreed with this sentiment as she asked, "Why do you disturb Betty again, in fact? Have you made your visit not already this morning? Go and be a nuisance elsewhere, I suppose. Actually, I was here to bring a guest, but getting to see you pouting like that was really worth it. You are just too cute. Maybe I should come more often." "No. Leave now or you will feel the wrath of the great Beatrice. Just visiting once per day is enough, I suppose." "Oh, I knew you cared about me. I will definitely come back tomorrow, and then we can go to the village. Playing with children your age is healthy for you, Biko." "Enough. I am 400 years old in fact. Stop treating me like a child. But it's just too adorable to see you flustered. I will take my leave now and leave you with Tanya here. I bet you two can become friends fast. You know, being blonde lawless and all that." Tanya wanted nothing more in that moment than to punch him, but reined her murderous urges in, because one of her punches would have severely injured him, and she needed him tomorrow. Nonetheless did she take the time to glare menacingly at him for his insolence. How dare he? Excuse this pitiful butler. He seems to have forgotten his place and will need to be taught a lesson. Subaru paled and visibly shivered under her cold gaze, and hastily retreated down the corridor like a wounded dog. Her fierce look was enough for a grown man to piss himself, and it was astounding that he hadn't done so. Maybe fighting the beasts in the forest had made him grow a spine. HMMPH. He is an annoying pest, I suppose. Tanya allowed a small grin to creep on her face. That much is certainly true. Would you mind if we talked about something more enjoyable for the both of us? Because I am sure we will be able to learn much about magic from each other today. Chapter 26 Learning Magic. You wondered earlier what the magic I was using was, and I would gladly teach you about its functionality. You may know that I am from beyond the great waterfall, and as such possess powers that have never before been seen in this land. If Tanya wanted to learn shadow magic, then she needed to give the librarian girl something in return. Such were the rules of capitalism. She doubted that Beatrice would allow her into the forbidden library for nothing in exchange. It was forbidden for a reason after all. Telling the seemingly young girl about her own brand of magic was the only thing of equal value for someone who valued knowledge above all else. That was the most effective way to bribe her into giving her access to the thousands of ancient tomes stored in this place. At least that was how she expected Beatrice's mind to function. Giving away some of her minor secrets would not hurt Tanya in the slightest, because anybody who practiced formulae-based magic needed a computation jewel to do so. The only two existing pieces in this world were in her possession as far as she knew. Mathematic equations would hopefully only confuse the people of this medieval society, because they would be unable to compute them fast enough to be of any real use. And what do you want in return, I suppose? Beatrice tried to sound bored, but the excited glint in her eyes was hard to miss. She had swallowed the hook. Bingo. In return, I would be thankful if you could let me borrow some of your books about shadow and light magic. That is an agreeable condition, very well. But the day was tiring and Betty wants to be left alone for now. To get you out of here faster, Betty will show you some books right now, I suppose. How thoughtful of her. This girl understood the importance of time management. They would work together well, she could feel it. A couple of studious hours later Tanya decided to test her newfound knowledge under the cover of night. Ideally nobody would even notice that she trained, and she could avoid some uncomfortable questions from the residents of the estate. Basically devouring several thick tomes had left her with many burning questions and theories that needed to be tested after nightfall. Carefully she left the house through her window and made her way to the backside of the mansion, where she was least likely to be noticed. It was time for testing her first elemental spell. Slowly she imagined pushing mana through her gate and visualized it forming into a black cloud around her. She felt the familiar sensation of magical energy singing in her blood and taking form just below her skin, but the feeling was slightly different. There was a pressure building inside her head that grew by the second. What was she doing wrong? Where was the mistake? Only veteran experience with countless life or death scenarios prevented her from panicking. Think, Tanya. Think, she frantically whispered. In all the books she had read, every spell had been named in strange ways. What she was attempting at the moment was called a shamak. A cloud of black fog that allegedly not only obscured the opponent's vision, but robbed them of their other senses as well. This little trick would be supremely useful in ambush situations, and to make a safe retreat from the battlefield. Could it be that she was supposed to say the word out loud like in these ridiculous stories about wizards and witches from her first world? Well, witches existed here, so why not give it a try? It was ridiculous and stupid, but she was quickly running out of options. With slight desperation she loudly chanted, "Shamak," and the world drowned in pure blackness. The crushing pressure in her head had gone away, but the result was disconcerting. Tanya had to use a quick flight burst to leave the radius of the massive smoke cloud in order to assess its volume. Unexpectedly, nearly half the mansion had been enveloped by the dark mist, even though she had performed her little experiment a good 50 meters away from the building. From what the book had described, she had assumed the cloud to be just a few meters in diameter, but this exceeded her every expectation. This artificial shadow could engulf hundreds of people if used correctly. Not to mention that she could just cast it repeatedly to expand the affected area. The only problem was that it had also taken more energy than anticipated. It was not much for someone with incredibly large mana reserves like her, but it was noticeable. Not to mention that she had likely terrified everybody inside the mansion. Hopefully nobody would think of this as an attack. "That was quite the powerful shamak, I suppose," said the little librarian floating beside her. Where had Beatrice come from? It was almost like she just appeared out of thin air. Then again, she was not human, so it was possible. Tanya managed to show no outwards reaction to her sudden arrival, but was internally frustrated because she had not seen it coming. This could have gotten her killed. She really needed to be more careful. "I take it that they are normally not that big." "Indeed. You lack a proper control of its power. This was your first time using one, I suppose." "Yes. I am not familiar with yin magic." "MMPH. You are fairly powerful for a human. I suppose I will have to teach you so you don't accidentally mess up this place." Betty could not care less if you reduced that clown's house to ashes, but she is sadly bound to protect the library there. "This leaves me with no other choice, I suppose. I am most grateful for your offer and humbly accept." This was a wonderful opportunity to learn even more. Books could only teach you so much, and the knowledge was often incomplete, or lacked a practical orientation. Beatrice just offered a perfect way to expand her arsenal in a faster way than expected. "That was not an offer, but your thanks are noted even though I do not need them." Betty already knows how great she is in fact. "Then how do you propose I could gain greater control over the spell?" "Just cast it quicker so that less mana is able to accumulate, in fact." Sounds easy enough." It was indeed easy enough. The mass of black fog was far smaller this time, and required comparatively no mana at all. But Tanya was still not satisfied. She decided to try something different this time. Instead of shoving her mana through her gate, she pushed it towards her Type 97 computation jewel, a process which she was intimately familiar with. Feeling silly by speaking the name of the spell out loud, she intoned, "Shamak," and the same result happened. Quickly measuring it with a volumetric formula revealed that had nearly the same proportions like the last shamak, but with the difference that it had cost roughly 30% less mana to produce. Was computing it properly, with a computation jewel really that much more efficient? Only now did she realize how much magical energy filled the atmosphere of this place. At first she had paid it no mind, because she had not used huge amounts of energy-intensive spells in the capital, so she had thought that her mana reserve recovering faster than normal was just a side effect from the good food and the relatively peaceful rest at night. Not fearing to get shot or bombed during a nap really did wonders for the morale. But now she finally understood that the energy density in general was larger than in her homeland. If this observation of needing 30% less mana was accurate, then that meant all the mags here were wasting unbelievable amounts of energy. Their primitive, just imagine it method held them back and weakened them. How fortunate for her. Due to the high energy density of this world's atmosphere, they were able to squander colossal quantities of mana without a care in the world, but that meant only that she would be able to cast far more magic than them, because she was resourceful. A third more energy was nothing to trivialize. It seemed as if her computation jewel served as an artificial gate that was more stable and could focus and distribute the magical energy far more effectively than a normal gate. A machine was apparently better suited for that than a frail, biological organ, which made sense to Tanya. Just like a car was superior to a horse, or in this case a ground dragon, a computation jewel was superior to human gate. How fascinating. Such were the wonders of progress and innovation. That reminded her that she would need to find a way to reliably produce spare parts for both her orbs to sustain them. Every few months they were in need of repair, or they would break down, which was an unacceptable outcome. Hopefully the smiths of this world would be up to the task, or she would have to invent a method to do it herself. Tanya could already feel a headache forming from the mere thought of all the effort she would have to put in. Thank you, Beatrice. I will visit you tomorrow after breakfast if that is all right with you. I suppose. Now Tanya needed time to think about what she had learnt. The future was looking bright. Chapter 27 Exchange of the Outsiders. Her little magic experiment hadn't gone as unnoticed as she had hoped, because as soon as she flew through her window and got ready for bed, the door to her room flew open, and a very exasperated maid stormed in. My apologies, Lady de Guchaf, for disturbing you, but is everything all right? Yes, of course. Why should it not be? Has something happened? We feared a possible attack on the mansion. Have you noticed any suspicious activity? You wouldn't possibly refer to the giant cloud of black smoke outside, she asked hopefully. Exactly that. Damn it. Well, then I have to apologize for worrying you and by extension your master as well. The strange happenings outside are my fault. Miss Beatrice graciously offered to teach me magic, and I might have gone a little overboard. Please forgive my mistake. I did not intend to disturb your sleep. I do not know if Lord Rosewell will forgive you for disturbing his cute maid's beauty sleep, but I would advise you to properly explain your nightly escapades tomorrow morning, remarked the pink-haired girl with a freezing tone in her voice. Of course. It was merely an accident. MMPH. We will see about that, Lady de Guchaf. We will see. If that was supposed to intimidate Tanya, then it failed miserably. She was not scared in the slightest of the empty threats that Ram seemed so fond of. After the indignant maid had closed the door behind her, Tanya began to trap the room with several motion-detecting spells that would run passively while she slept. It was bad enough that she could not lock the door to prevent intruders from suddenly entering like Ram had done, but it would at the very least alert her to their presence. Her maid shell was also activated in case that someone tried to shoot at her from the doorway or through the annoyingly vulnerable windows. Seriously, how was this place supposed to be defended if all the windows were made from glass and were multiple meters big? Pure foolishness. Everyone could just smash through and would be inside. In a conflict, this building would be useless. After making sure that all her security measures functioned as they should, she allowed herself a few hours of restless sleep. Even though the bed was comfortable, she was plagued by nightmares. Morning began with her reading the rest of the books until it was time for breakfast. Due to her bad dreams, she had woken early and was extremely sleep-deprived, which soured her mood. Without Visha's heavenly coffee, this was only worsened. So it was no surprise that she barely spoke a word at the dining table, and only stared blankly into her tasteless meal. Then the stupid maid brought up yesterday's incident again, and made matters even worse. Tanya had secretly hoped that she would forget the whole affair, but of course the pink-haired bitch had not done her that favor. Now she had to explain the nature of her magic experiments with Beatrice. She made sure to inconspicuously pass as much of the blame as she could onto the other girl, because the petite librarian was not present during the conversation, and didn't seem to be on good terms with Rosewell. This meant that there was only a very small chance that both of them would extensively talk about the whole affair, and he would notice the small errors and exaggerations in her story. Her saving grace was that Rosewell had not been present when it happened, because he was in the forest hunting beasts, and Amelia and Subaru had been too fast asleep to be aware of what happened outside. In the end it came down to a disagreement between two maids and a royal candidate, so it was clear who won the debate about her innocence. Unfortunately, her magic training was restricted to the daytime hours, but that was only a minor annoyance. A bigger problem was that she needed the help of a strange to find Beatrice's library again. Well, she just had to make the best out of the situation by interrogating the boy alone. Subaru, do you have a moment to spare? Surely. What you want, Lady Diguchaff? It would only be a matter of time before the details of her origin spread around if Amelia or Rosewell had not already told him. So to give him this information that was already useless, or would soon become common knowledge anyway, was an easy decision. She needed to find out more about him to accurately assess his threat level, or rather usefulness for her plans. As you may already know, I was not born in this world. I believe the same applies to you. His expression turned into one of comical shock. Tanya had to stifle a laugh at his foolishness. What? How did you? Are you from Japan as well? Yes and no actually, thought Tanya. That was a predictable, but complicated question that required a small misdirection to be answered. He had also just admitted to hail from Japan, which would hopefully make him relate to her a bit more if she phrased her story properly. Indeed. I was born in Japan, but I moved to a different country and spent more than a decade there. So I sadly do not remember much of my original homeland. She needed to speak the truth in the unlikely case that damned Puck listened in or Amelia decided to question her later in the presence of Subaru. She hated mind-reading magic. It violated every sense of privacy and dignity that a person could have. Not even the sanctity of your own thoughts was secured in this land. Ah, okay. He seemed a little put out by this, but quickly recovered with a smile. But that's cool. How long do you have been here then? In Lugnica, I mean. Around 9 days maybe. And you? Let me think. Also 9 days. How is that possible? Although you could say that it was also a hell of a lot longer for me than that. The last part was muttered so quietly that she had trouble understanding what he said. What was that about? Judging from the haunted look in his eyes, it must have been something unpleasant. Also, the coincidence was too big to be random. How could they both appear at roughly the exact time and place? That seemed implausible. Was this being X's ploy? It had to be. The idiotic bastard had probably arranged for them both to meet up. But why? What could he gain from this? A terrible suspicion overcame Tanya. Are you religious? I don't know. Not really. I mean, I am open for other ideas. Do you believe in God? Hey there. No need to look so intense. You giving me a fright there. He. No, I don't think I believe in God. At least I never seen or felt anything that would convince me to believe. You are not a religious extremist, are you? No. Quite the opposite. I just had to make sure you were not one of them. I had bad experience with these types of people in the past. She pushed the unwanted memory of Mary Sue's crazed face down and blocked it with as much willpower as she could muster. Never again. If anyone like that appeared in her life, then she would hunt them down and absolutely crush them before they could become a threat. Being X's puppets would never endanger her ever again. Ah? Say, if you are from Earth, did you perchance bring a solar-powered power bank with you? I'm not sure how much longer my mobile phone will last. What for the Empire's sake was a power bank? Some sort of battery maybe. And solar-powered. She had heard that word somewhere. Had it something to do with the sun? Could he mean a battery that recharged in the sun? Had something like that even existed when she died in her first life? So many questions, and only one way to find out. No, I do not possess such a device. Allow me, which year was it when you were transported here? 2009. Wonderful. That meant that he understood how much better a democratic, capitalistic state was compared to this feudal, monarchist society. Science and reason were staples of the modern age that had probably been ingrained into him by savoring the benefits of the post-industrial era. They would work together beautifully when she had hammered a bit more seriousness into his head, for only he would truly understand what she was talking about. All of that was of course only true if his dimension was like her first life. If his dimension was an alternative reality, where intelligent clouds ruled the earth and enslaved humanity, then there would be little hope for an intellectual conversation in that regard, but she doubted that. Maybe she should inquire how long he had been in school to discern his state of knowledge. How old are you? 17, and you? Again a tricky question that had no simple answer. On one hand her consciousness had existed for nearly 50 years, but on the other hand her body was only 16 years old. I don't know exactly, but I have been born around 16 years ago. Cool. Then you are basically my younger sister. I always wanted a cute, little sister to tease. By the way, how were you teleported here? I just kind of blinked and in the next moment, I was standing in the middle of the capital. Pretty crazy, right? Tanya's eyebrow twitched in annoyance. She was nobody's little sister. And she was above all not cute. As much as she hated her title of Devil of the Rhine, she had rightfully earned it through struggle and bloodshed. There was nothing cute about her. What was this buffoon thinking how their relationship had progressed during the duration of this conversation? He was still a measly servant, and she was a royal candidate. Subaru was lucky that she didn't demand his head for his disrespect. I am not your little sister. I have fought in a war, and was part of the military, when you were still in primary school. Rein in your wild fantasy, because others might not react as well as I to your bad jokes. Subaru gulped. Chill, dude. Just saying. Anyway, you were in a war. What war? Shit. She hadn't meant to bring attention to this fact. How could she cover this blunder up? A conflict with a few of our neighboring countries. It went on for a few years, but I doubt you have heard of it. But why would you join the army at that age? Isn't that illegal? Ha! If only the command staff had shared his opinion, but the Empire was desperate for mags and accepted nearly everybody who displayed enough magical potential. Regardless of age or gender. A fact which had been a lucky strike for her, but was in reality just pure insanity. Why had nobody questioned if it was morally repulsive to send a 12-year-old girl to the front lines? She blamed Rudersdorf, the mad dog. I had no other choice. Becoming a soldier was preferable to starving in an orphanage. If I had better parents, then my life would have been different. For me it's rather the opposite, I guess. If my parents hadn't been so good at everything, I would not have been crushed under the weight of their expectations. Pathetic. Such good role models should have motivated him to do better. They would have forced him to greatness. Nonetheless did she refrain from lecturing him about this topic. Tanya tried to quickly change the subject of the conversation before Subaru pestered her with his undoubtedly tragic backstory any longer. As if he would know anything about tragedy. He didn't have to wake up without Visha's coffee. You said that you just blinked and landed in capital, right? How interesting. The same thing happened to me. Wow. We really have a lot of similarities. Wait. Does that mean? Do you can do that as well? What? I can do what? Did you die perhaps? Did he figure her out? Had he uncovered the secret of her reincarnation? Maybe he really was an agent sent by Being X. It was best to give a non-verbal answer in case that he could detect lies. So she cocked her head to the side and hummed questioningly. Can you also return by HHHKKK? Ah? Damn, that hurt. Subaru clutched his heart and grimaced in obvious pain. What was happening right now? Had he gone insane? She needed to distance herself from him before another resident of the mansion could accuse her of poisoning him, or something like that. Her reputation was already damaged from the incident last night, and she really didn't need further false evidence to worsen that. Subaru, I think we talked enough for now. I would be very grateful if you could show me the entrance to the Forbidden Library again, please. Of course. Follow me, he said with a hollow voice and empty eyes, which was quite unnerving, considering that he always seemed so cheerful and carefree. A few minutes later, and they arrived at another random door that he had inexplicably divined to be the right one. I have to go. Ram will be angry with me if she thinks I am slacking off. Tanya just nodded and stepped inside the library, without a second glance at the rapidly retreating boy. It was time to teach Beatrice about magic formulae. Chapter 28, Dealing with Wolves. What are you doing here, I suppose, said Beatrice, as she looked up from the book she was currently reading. I intend to honor our agreement, of course. You helped me yesterday with discovering shadow magic, and I was under the impression that you would appreciate me teaching you in return, answered Tanya with a charming smile. MMPH. If you are already here, then get on with it, I suppose. Gladly. A little under an hour later, and she had clearly overwhelmed the poor girl with her descriptions of field regulation and vector calculation. It was pretty amusing to see how much Beatrice's mindset struggled to accept the logic-based magic that Tanya showed her. The alien concepts that her mathematic formulae provided her with must have looked like gibberish to any citizen of Ludnica. When she felt like she had confused the pitiful librarian enough, she packed her sheets full of diagrams and calculations up and said goodbye. Oh, and if you see Booby on your way, tell him that he should visit more often. HMPH. Forgive the question, but who is Booby? You may know him as Puck, I suppose. Now leave, I am not used to so many daily visitors. It is distracting, in fact. It was clear as day that her inability to comprehend Tanya's teaching had deeply frustrated her when she still pouted like an angry child. Tanya congratulated herself for a job well done. Beatrice would not be able to use her own knowledge against her. Wonderful. A seemingly equivalent exchange from which only she profited. Emilia was not hard to find. Mostly because she sat at the same spot as yesterday, but this time without Subaru. Only her weird cat spirit Puck kept her company, as he watched her from a distance while she meditated on the front lawn. The strange thing was that she was surrounded by different colored orbs of light that swarmed all around her. She looked like she was deep in concentration, so Tanya kept a dozen meters away from her to not disturb whatever she was doing. Her annoying companion, however, had noticed her, so she made an effort to engage in a polite conversation, while she was mindful not to raise her voice unnecessarily. Greetings, Puck. I should say you that Beatrice misses your presence, and you should pay her a visit once in a while. I am under the impression that she gets fairly lonely in her library. Yeah. Betty doesn't come out of there very often. She not a very outgoing person. You could say she is quite the opposite of me, even though we are siblings. Siblings? Not real sibling, but more, adopted in a sense. But I thought you were a spirit that lived countless centuries. Beatrice is certainly younger than that. Didn't he, She is a spirit as well. A great spirit, in fact. No, I didn't. Last time I saw her she appeared rather corporeal. I had assumed that she wasn't a human from her demeanor alone, but I wouldn't have expected her to be a spirit. Are there more people that walk around who might be spirits in disguise? No. Great spirits are rare, and mostly take on animal forms. Well, I knew someone once who could fit that description, but he is dead. I am sure. A sensitive topic. Better draw the conversation away from it then, before Puck became depressed and didn't answer her questions anymore. By the way, What are these lights that surround Emilia? They are minor spirits that she is talking to right now. Normally she communes with them only twice a day, but because of her stay in the capital she has a lot to catch up to, you know. Ah? And what do they tell her? All kinds of little secrets and events. What the birds in tree over there have been doing, how the grass grows, what the nearby villagers are talking about, what the new guest does in her free time. What? Ha ha. Only joking. Partially. They are not intelligent enough to understand real words or exact happenings, but it is enough for emotions and general feelings. That sounded insanely useful. She had read about the spirit arts in one of her books, but she hadn't thought that it could be such a valuable tool. This simple meditation allowed the practitioner to basically employ invisible and untraceable spies that were also probably able to go through walls. With this at her disposal, no enemy would be able to hide from her. It sounded too good to be true. How can you learn this technique? Do you need to become a spirit arts user? Well, I wouldn't call it a technique, and you are not required to be a spirit arts user to accomplish this. A spirit arts user is someone who forms a contract with one or more spirits at a time, but in order to talk with lesser spirits you don't need contracts. Just your affinity for spirits needs to be relatively high. If you are wondering, no, you don't have a particularly strong affinity. Would you be able to find out more? Sure thing. Just let me touch your forehead real quick. His miniature paw retracted quickly, and he held it as if it was burnt. What just happened? Are you hurt? She was legitimately concerned for his well-being. It would leave a terrible impression of her if she accidentally hurt Emilia's companion after all. Not only do you have no affinity for them, you actively repulse them. When I came into contact with you it felt like I was repelled instantly. It was really strange. I am a great spirit and as such I am way more resistant to these kinds of feelings, but the little ones over there would not even be able to go near you if you went to greet them. In all my centuries of being alive I have never seen something like this. Instead of a lacking affinity, I would call it a spirit aversion. Very funny. So there is no chance that can learn this. She pointed at Emilia, who still sat motionless with her eyes closed. Nope. Not a chance in hell. Tanya could only sigh in disappointment. She had been right, it was too good to be true. She nonetheless continued to watch Emilia, determined to still discover the functionality of spirit communication. If she herself was unable to do so, then she would just train some of her subordinates to do the job for her. The division of labor to share tasks between specialized individuals was one of the greatest strengths of mankind after all and formed the foundation for an effective, capitalist society. Ah, hello Tanya. Nice to meet you here. We didn't get to talk much during breakfast. The silver-haired girl had finished her business with the minor spirits apparently. Yes, that is true. I was just watching how you summoned so many spirits, and was very impressed by how you did it. Emilia blushed. Oh, it is nothing really. Everybody could do that. Well, I certainly can. Tanya dryly remarked. Seeing the half-elf's questioning look, she explained, Puck assessed my affinity with spirits, and found out that I seem to be utterly incompatible with them. It is not all that surprising really if you consider that no such creatures existed where I came from. Spirits and ghosts were usually reserved for fairy tales, or the stuff of legends. But Subaru also said that his homeland didn't have spirits, and he gets along pretty well with them. That was good to know. She would need to consider the possibility that he was also spying on her with the help of these spirits. So many potential security risks. It was nerve-wracking. Was it possible to make a room, for lack of a better word, spirit-proof? Did some kind of magic exist that could lock out these pesky, invisible observers? Hopefully Beatrice knew the answer. As a magic user and spirit, she was the most qualified expert. Interesting. Has he also learned any magic yet? If Subaru was an ordinary boy from the normal, non-magical Japan that she knew, then he was either totally inept in this field, or a novice at best. Still, it was important to gauge his abilities. Yes. He can manage a few shamaks and minyas already. Sadly, his gait is damaged and is in urgent need of healing. That was something I wanted to talk with you about anyway. He was a yin magic user as well. The suspicious coincidences certainly piled up further and further. What was her personal, supernatural tormentor planning with the boy? The fact that being X hadn't he already shown himself to her in one of his demented speeches was unnerving her greatly. Each day that elapsed without his interference made her tenser. Something was brewing at the horizon, and she didn't like it one bit. How could I possibly help with his gait? I am no healer. I know, but I would be grateful if you could take him back with you to the capital when you return home, and bring him to Lady Crush. She has the best healer in Lugnica, under her employ, and he is our best hope of restoring his health. That opens the question why Lady Crush should do such a thing. He is a member of an opposing camp after all. Well, I might have made a deal with her that puts him under her protection until he is fully healed. Sorry, that I didn't tell you beforehand. No worries, Emilia. I trust you that you would not betray me. The half-elf had already started to refer to her on a first-name basis, and now she tried the same. It was not the proper way, but she had long learned that strictly following the protocol often lead to disaster. To truly be successful, you had to know which rules of society to bend in your favor. This served to tighten their connection by pretending to be friends. Bringing her closer was easy, because Emilia was for some reason way too trusting for someone who was hated by the entire world. Oh no. She nearly forgot that Puck was listening in. She needed to think something positive. Quick. Emilia was a kind person who made a good, but not very trustworthy, friend. She would gladly help her reach her goals, because they were very reasonable and were morally right. Tanya would even happily make her queen if she swore to always listen to her advice. In this case, Emilia would take the blame from the public if something disastrous happened, and she would be the one who was targeted by assassination attempts. Thank you, Tanya, she smiled. I see. Have you thought about my proposal? Not the technicalities or the specifics, but just the general gist of our alliance. Yes, but I don't know. I don't know if I want to give up on becoming queen yet. I mean, the royal selection has just begun and... I understand. Tanya interrupted. The girl had still doubts that needed to be quelled. Luckily, her experience of working in the Human Resources Department would come in handy. I really do. This is a hard decision to make, and it is very selfish of me to demand an answer from you in a few days, but know this. She tried her best to look as soft, but at the same time as serious as possible. Whatever you choose, I will not hold it against you. Even if you decline my offer, I hope that we can be somewhat friendly towards one another in the future. Just because we would be rivals then doesn't mean that we must hate each other. We both will be robbed of an opportunity, but that is how life functions. We can always get the things we want. You will have to brave to journey to the throne completely on your own, and I will have to look for new allies to save this kingdom. Nonetheless, will we prevail? Tanya made it purposefully sound like Emilia would lose more than she if she refused the bargain. She also used what information she could glean about the girl to make her losses seem more significant. For example, she knew that Emilia was lonely and understandably afraid of the world that despised her. By indirectly stating that this might be her only chance at gaining an ally, she pressured her into accepting. Emilia wouldn't push the only person of importance, with the exception of Rosewall, away, who extended a helping hand to her. Thank you. No problem. I must be going now. I have much to study after all. While she made her way to her room, she allowed herself a feral grin. Mission success. The girl was deceived without her ever having to lie. It wasn't even a malicious act, because she truly wanted to help her. Alone, Emilia would have no chance at rescuing her friends from the forest, simply because the people of Lugnica would never vote for her regardless of how many good deeds she did. Humans were mostly not very rational creatures, and generally did not change that much in just a few years. The Republicans in exile certainly hadn't changed their minds in spite of the utter stupidity of their plans and their pathetic defeat. People were sheep. And she was the wolf. Chapter 29 Acquiring Wisdom. Back to sword training and magic studying. Oh joy! Well, there were far worse recreational activities. Like burning dead bodies or digging a trench or doing extra paperwork, because everybody else was too stupid to handle it correctly. At least she experienced a feeling of accomplishment when polishing her abilities that would ultimately ensure her survival. Wielding a long blade was unusual for Tanya, but she got pretty decent with it. At least when you took into consideration that she had her cutlass for less than a week at this point. As long as you knew which end of the sword to point at your opponent and you were faster than them, the match was won. Technically it could be considered cheating if you stimulated yourself with artificial drugs and enhancement spells, but it had the effect that even her sloppy and untrained movements became faster than the normal eye could see. She would need to practice more with Reinhard, but against anyone who wasn't a sword-fighting prodigy it would suffice. Her new magic abilities were similarly just brute force to achieve impressive results in the least amount of time. A staple of her military career. For some unknown reason the magic in this world functioned based on a tier system of L, Ol, and Ol that determined the power of a spell. As if it wasn't bad enough that she had to openly announce what she conjured by loudly saying, for example, Shamak, she also had to use these stupid prefixes. Not even Beatrice had been able to tell her from which language these words were derived from, because they sounded unlike any other dialect in the world. How strange. Anyway, using these words in conjunction with a spell increased their power, as well as their difficulty. Sometimes this could lead to nasty repercussions if the spell was not absolutely mastered by its user. Her strategy of avoiding this consisted of simply pumping more mana into it, because she could afford it. The Type 97 reduced the energy cost around 30% after all, so she had plenty to spare. This heightened power output imitated the next higher tier of magic without actually using it. For example, a simple Shamak would become similar to an El Shamak by utilizing more mana than normal without her needing to put any extra effort into it. Sadly this worked not on Ol tier magic for whatever reason, but she would need to test this at home. The destructive potential of some of these spells was pretty huge, and she didn't want to damage Rosewell's forest any more than he already had with his Mabeast Purge. Some of her favorite new tricks were Jewald, the ability to shoot burning beams of light from her fingertips, which reminded her of her mage blades, but more distance-oriented, and Minya, the ability to summon and shoot crystallizing shards of purple energy, which would serve as her ranged attack until she found a way to replicate bullets for her gun. There were of course other, more exotic spells like Nect that allegedly allowed the user to connect the gates of multiple people and produce a form of telepathy. But to test those she would need willing participants. Risk of injury was too high for it to use on Subaru, even though he probably wouldn't refuse. Murak was borderline useless to her, because she could already fly and reducing her gravity would only confuse her in a fight due to years of muscle memory that would be invalidated by having no momentum. Still, it could also be cast on objects, which would allow her to transport heavy things easier and for longer distances. Its opposite, Vita, increased the gravity of an object, which could be insanely overpowered if used at the right moment in a fight. If cast onto an opponent mid-jump, then they would plummet down to the earth and be unable to move if they weren't incredibly strong. Should they still be able to stand, then they would hopefully be slowed down enough to allow for a quick attack from above or behind. Tanya gleefully imagined what would have happened if she could have used this back in the Empire. Droves of enemy mags would suddenly stop moving and drop to the ground like dead flies, ready to be picked up like the cannon fodder they were. The very thought brought a wicked smile to her face. Anyone who would have looked in this moment at the seemingly cute girl would have felt a shiver running down their spine. Of course there were many more spells, but they were either just worse versions of stuff she already possessed or were unbelievably tough to replicate. Beatrice used her door crossing to distort space itself, which was a feat that awed Tanya. How was that even possible? Didn't that break the laws of continuity? Magic was incredible, but it followed very strict mathematical and physical principles. To bend space and somehow even time like it was described in one of her books boggled the mind, because it nearly transcended these rules. When she had asked the little librarian how she had done it, she had either given a non-answer, or claimed it to be Betty's secret. As Tanya now knew, she was a great spirit of yin, and was likely one of, if not the, greatest shadow magician in the world, so it didn't bother her too much. The likelihood of Beatrice becoming her enemy was very low, and she was so protective of her secrets that she would probably not tell anyone who could use such teleportation spells against her. Young magic in general was also hard to learn, because books on the subject were even rarer to find in the Forbidden Library than yin books. Furthermore, she couldn't ask anybody other than Rosewall for help in this regard. How was that even fair, by the way? Why could the Margrave control all 6 elements, but she couldn't? Maybe the fame had gotten to her head, but she had been heralded as the greatest combat mage in the world 2 weeks ago, and the thought of now sharing her fame left a sour taste in her mouth for some reason. Healing magic or throwing fireballs sounded so useful. She wanted it. The world was unfair. It always had been. Crying over spilt milk wasn't productive in the slightest, so she would have to work with what she had. She should almost certainly be thankful that she had affinities for 2 elements, which was pretty rare. Being compatible with both light and shadow was practically unheard of. Even if a person was born with such a skill set, they would probably not be able to make much use out of it, because both yin and yang magic required astronomical amounts of mana to cast compared to the regular elements. All of that had required barely a few hours to find out, and made Tanya feel very satisfied with herself. When she went on her way to the dining room for dinner, she was very content with what she had managed to achieve already in her short time being here. The first thing that attracted her attention when Emilia entered the room was that she looked rather glum. When the troubled look didn't leave her face after several minutes, Tanya decided to break the ice and end her silence. "What is the matter, Emilia? Has something happened?" she asked worriedly. She made sure to be actually worried in order to fool Puck again. The mood of her hostess and business partner was really important to her after all, so it wasn't too difficult. "Oh, just. While you were away, a messenger arrived and brought some confusing letters. I am not sure what to make of it. If you want to, you can tell me. I have a lot of experience with politics and these kinds of things. Perhaps I can help you." Her desire to help was real. Taking this opportunity would improve Emilia's opinion of her, and would allow her to demonstrate her superior management skills. She hoped this charade was enough to fool the cat spirit. It's kind of embarrassing. I swear I will not judge you before you have explained everything. Do I look like somebody who got so far in life just by making premature assumptions? Well, some nobles asked for my hand. They what? Yelled Subaru. Honestly, the boy showed his childish emotions way too openly. And he was unnecessarily loud on top. He wouldn't last a second in any meaningful negotiation with this attitude. You know. They want to marry me. Yes. I think we all understood that. Never. They want to take my beautiful Emilia Tan away from me. That was creepy. He should hide his possessiveness more. Ram seemed to agree. Pervert Barusu. I isn't that wonderful, added Rosewall. Tanya decided to intervene before the poor girl got too flustered and died from a heart attack or something. No, it is really not. Questioning stares from all around the room followed, and she felt compelled her to elaborate. Was it really so hard to understand? Forming alliances through marriage may sound compelling for some, but you have to be aware of your status, Emilia. These people don't see you as a normal girl, or even a real royal candidate. They sadly only regard you for your influence and power. What you are trying to achieve is totally unimportant to them, and they do not care for your personality. Even worse, when they look at you, they will only see the witch of envy in their stupidity. The silver-haired half-elf flinched at the mentioning of the name, which caused her so much pain. When these kinds of people try to impress you, then they don't really mean it. Only your money is what counts for them. The council has prohibited the candidates to marry during the royal selection, for good reason, and the nobles know this as well. They have no intention of binding themselves to someone who looks, in their opinion, like the devil. They only want to manipulate you into deluding yourself that they care. It was a bit hypocritical of her to lecture her about manipulative nobles, but it was true. Reply to them in a polite manner to not alienate them, But otherwise you don't need to waste a single second to think about such a ridiculous offer. Throw these letters in the trash. I doubt you would want to marry someone who you don't love anyway. Subaru gave his unneeded opinion as well. Exactly. There is only one right man for you. She would have voluntarily prayed to being X to avoid hearing him finish his little speech. Me? Both Tanya and the maid twins winced in pain for different reasons. As charming as you might be, Subaru, I believe you should probably gain more of a social standing before you say things like this. Maybe become a knight or found a successful business. If you wanted something, then you had to also offer something in return. Preferably something of equal value. That was just common sense. HMPH. Even that will not be enough. Being Barusu is a curse in and of itself. No girl could ever want a loser like that. The boy took the poisonous words in stride. He clutched his heart in mock hurt and dramatically exclaimed, "You wound me, Ram-chan. How will I ever recover from this? I will probably need much consolation from Emilia Tan to soothe my aching heart." "Really?" asked the innocent half-elf worriedly, which contrasted heavily with the upset Ram's next statement. "What did I say? Don't call me that. Or do you want to clean the attic again?" "But I already did that," he whined. "Sister, you are being too harsh. Subaru is actually wonderful. He saved me and the children after all." "Yes, sister. I guess he was useful that one time. This shows that he at least qualifies as a passable meat shield for my precious sister." As amusing at this eyes, I agree with Lady de Guchaf's assessment. You shouldn't pay attention to Thu's offers. Tanya wanted to use the situation in her favor. Now was her time to shine by distancing herself from the scheming nobles in the capital. Hopefully this would be enough to cement herself as trustworthy in Emilia's mind. If somebody truly wants to establish an honest relationship with you, then they will make an effort to meet you face to face. I realize that I am not necessarily in a position to say this, but it is true. I came here to this mansion to learn more about you, precisely because I was sincere when I offered you an alliance. As much as I like to mention that it is your choice to accept, it is mine as well. Had I found out during my stay that you were not the kind-hearted, honest, caring person that I expected, then I would have retracted my offer. That was the truth. If Emilia had turned out to be a sadistic bitch, for example, then she would have not affiliated with her. Her reputation was at stake. Only because I took my time to get to know you better, I could be sure that you will be the right one for my plans, and the opposite is also true. You best make a decision after you understand how your potential partner acts and thinks. Only sending a letter after they have met you once is not enough. She hoped the message had been clear. Tanya von de Guchaf was a trustworthy individual with no bad intentions. Only she was trustworthy enough for Emilia. She gave her advice after all. Yes. I understand. Tanya smiled genuinely and thought about the most pleasant thing she could come up with at the moment. A happy memory of Visha's coffee was all it took to deceive Puck's mind reading. What a pleasant day. Chapter 30, The Final Offer. Reading about the same pseudoscientific theories and instructions for spellcasting and the application of magic became boring quickly after Tanya had read all books about the topic that Beatrice was willing to lend her. Both yin and yang magic were not well-researched fields of arcane knowledge stemming from the lack of talented mags with the necessary affinities. Therefore most works discussing them were riddled with speculation and guesswork, which meant that Tanya would have to test them in detail herself. It was not only annoyance that she would have to waste time checking the work of others, because they had been unable to do their job correctly, but it also meant that she couldn't be sure about the exact nature of the high-tier spells. They were much more potent and dangerous, so they would require careful study before she potentially injured herself by using them. Her safety was paramount, and would not be risked by trusting information from outdated books. That left her with few things to do besides sword training. Even that was rather ineffective without a sparring partner like Reinhard. The only other obligation would have been teaching Beatrice, but the librarian spirit had refused any more lessons in advanced mathematics, which filled Tanya's heart with joy. Nobody could say that she hadn't tried to uphold her end of the bargain. Now she wouldn't have to give away her secrets anymore, as inconsequential as they might be. So, to not waste any of her precious time, she began to catalogue and sketch the most useful inventions from both her previous lives down on paper. The majority of the really valuable ones were sadly beyond her grasp, and were not something that she could replicate in a few years. Stuff like cars, electricity, plastic explosives, or vaccines required intricate manufacturing from trained professionals to produce. Her knowledge on these things extended no further than how to use them. Still, she knew enough useful things to give her a head start by at least a few centuries. Her self-developed combat doctrines, knowledge on ballistics and guns, and expertise in finances and economics would hopefully be able to revolutionize this medieval society. When she had asked Amelia if she knew what a national central bank, or a share price, was, her answer had only consisted of confused head-scratching, which was already a bad sign. Or a good sign, depending on your perspective. In deficiency laid opportunity after all. With all the money she would earn through introducing modern concepts like these into this world, she could fund research projects to reinvent some of the machines that were beyond her grasp. Even with the limited knowledge on these subjects, at least some ideas would certainly be developed for which she could claim ownership. Over the years, she would modernize the land step by step and lead it to industrialization. A process which would only become easier through the widespread use of magic everywhere. Manna was easier to find than coal. At the end, Ludnica would be so far ahead of the metaphorical curve that the other nations would not even think of declaring war on her, but would instead beg and plead to be a part of the technological change until the whole world advanced to a more civilized level. Her only concern was the environmental pollution that would be caused by this. Hopefully she would be able to prevent this from happening by teaching the people about the dangers of irresponsible resource depletion, thereby stopping an ecological catastrophe before it even began. No need to repeat the mistakes of the past. This and many more important thoughts about the future filled not only her head, but now also stacks of paper full of illegible glyphs and symbols. To anyone but her it would have looked like the work of a madwoman. Tanya knew better. Now that she was aware of the possibility that invisible spirits were spying on her at every possible moment, she encrypted her notes and shortened longer words whenever possible. It was a bit paranoid considering that nobody here, even Subaru, would be able to read Germanian anyway, but one could never be too careful. Aside from that, she also prepared a few templates for letters that she would send once she arrived back at the capital. She needed as much support from the nobles as she could gather, and that definitely required her to make visits to the most important houses and engage in discussions about her future plans with them. Tanya already dreaded the petty smooth talk and multi-layered speeches full of hidden agendas that such people would torture her with. Kissing up to one's superiors wasn't something new to her by any stretch of the imagination, but it was still unpleasant. Nonetheless, was it a shame that she would have to wait until the end of the week before she could make her move on them. The other candidates were almost certainly gaining followers and forming alliances, while she was stuck here in the middle of nowhere. If Amelia defied reason and rejected her proposal against all odds, then Tanya would have wasted a crucial opportunity to secure her standing in the political landscape. This was the beginning of the royal selection after all. Well, it wasn't like she could expect many nobles to swear allegiance to her right from the start. To invest into an unknown player like her was risky, and rich people were usually pretty reluctant when it came to potentially wasting lots of money. Actions spoke louder than words, so her achievements and popularity among the proletariat would have to be enough to eventually sway them to her side, but that would require time. Come to think of it, her mostly trying to appeal to the working populace might even be the better strategy in the long run. Crush and Priscilla were only fixated on the nobles if her quick character assessment proved correct, and Anastasia clearly targeted the wealthy middle class, who could afford investing into her multiple businesses. Tanya's only competition in winning over the hearts of the working and lower class was theoretically Amelia, who wanted to improve the living conditions of the poorer people. But the girl was much too shy to openly show herself and properly capitalize on her good deeds. This influence vacuum created an exciting opportunity for Tanya to tap into an unattended audience of desperate and unheard commoners. A consumer group that would happily lap up even the smallest bones that she threw to them. Yes indeed, the seemingly powerless people that she had met on the streets of the capital and in the slums would be her greatest asset. When she had declared at the beginning of the royal selection that she would lead Ludnica to greatness no matter the cost and potentially without the support of the nobles, that had been a risky gamble. She still stood by her word, but at the same time she hadn't wanted to alienate the aristocracy. Instead she wanted to show her unwavering commitment to prove that they could rely on her to be a winning horse in this race for the throne. A driving force to be reckoned with was what she had wanted them to see. But now she thought about how she could build upon this and make herself out to be a fighter for the common folk. Her hatred for communism was still brightly burning within her heart, but it couldn't be denied that this train wreck of an ideology had been very effective in rallying vast amounts of human resources to its cause. Maybe she could do the same, or at least make use of its methods. She could already imagine the gigantic propaganda murals and banners with labels like "Vote for Tanya von Diguchaff," "Bread and free education for all," "The future belongs to all of us," "Money, blood or birth do not determine your worth." Yeah, that would probably be effective to just directly appeal to the general public. If she really wanted to, then she could even overthrow the current ruling system after she had seized power and build a democratic state in its place. Although the potential for this endeavor to escalate into a Francois revolution was high, and senseless bloodshed would only make things for her and the country worse. What if the people started to turn on her suddenly? It happened often with emotional-driven political campaigns. The leaders of the movement were blamed for all of the people's problems and either forcefully discharged from their position or just straight up executed. No, thanks. Better no revolution. Slow reforms were much more successful at inciting long-lasting change anyway. Not canon o make. 2 years later. Long live the revolution, screamed Tanya from atop the smouldering ruins of the royal palace. Long live the revolution, shouted the mob filling the plaza from down below. She increased the power of her sound amplification formula until everybody on this side of the city could hear her clearly. Today we freed ourselves from the shackles of the past. From the tyranny of the nobles who thought they could trample over us simply because they were born with power they didn't earn. But guess what? We now fought for this power. We bled and suffered for it. We earned it. Now it is finally within our reach. Everybody deserves a chance in this new country. No longer will our heritage, or these false prophets dictate our fate. Only our hard and honest labor can decide our destiny and our worth. So, my people, I ask you, who are we? Equals. 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 Yes, we are. Embrace your families, kiss your loved ones. For this day shall mark the beginning of a golden era of prosperity and freedom. Tanya. 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 Tanya, chanted the crowd with glee. Tonight the dragon kingdom of Ludnica fell, and the free state of Ludnica rose in its place. Elsewhere, deep under the sea, Andrew smiled to himself. Something beautiful had just happened. He could feel it. No gods or kings. Only men. Indeed, he grinned. Tanya stopped her somewhat unrealistic daydreaming and got back to work. Far-fetched fantasies had no place in her timetable while so much work had to be done. It really seems like the cushy life away from immediate danger has already gotten to my head. Maybe the good food and comfortable beds are beginning to make me soft, she murmured to herself with a dry chuckle. Isolating herself too much from Amelia and her associates would not be a good idea if she wanted to appear approachable and relatable. Gaining the half-elf's trust was imperative for her plan to work. With this alliance she would strengthen her own position drastically. Not only would she practically double the size of her camp, but also take out a possible rival. So at long last she finally organized their first real negotiation since her proposal in the Astria mansion. Thank you for coming, Amelia. I am aware that we never really spoke about what I want from you while you already told me what you desire. That was not fair from my part, so I'd like to correct this mistake now. What do you think I would demand in case that we form an alliance? The poor girl was clearly overwhelmed by the direct question at the beginning. Good. Catching her off guard had been intended. Furthermore, it saved them both time. Well, based on what you said in the capital, I assumed that you want me to resign from the royal selection and support you in your campaign, because you have a better chance at succeeding than I. Yes. That was how I worded it back then. And in return I would make your wishes come true that you were going to fulfill anyways if you were to become queen. Tanya looked her deep into the eyes and let that sink in. Of course we will have to hammer out the finer details at a later date, but that was the general idea of our alliance. Do you believe our host here would appreciate that? Eh? No, I don't think so. I suspected as much. Rosewall would understandably not be pleased with this arrangement. Giving up on ascending the throne would be a grave insult to him. He is your trusted sponsor after all. So I have a slightly different offer for you. Rosewall was a powerful individual that Tanya wanted to rely on in the future. Simply destroying the Amelia camp, by tricking the half-elf into being abandoned by her sponsor, was not a desirable outcome. He would not spend his time and money on somebody who could not become queen after all. In order to control the Margrave, she needed him bound to Amelia, so she had changed her tactic. If we signed the contract the way I described it, then you would totally abandon your chance at the royal selection, but it does not have to be this way. What if we participate alongside each other? What do you mean? I am saying that we will help each other and share our resources to a certain extent, but it will not be possible for you to become queen. Every success you achieve will be credited to your camp under the condition that you mention my help should I have assisted you in the situation. In exchange, I will try my best to publicly vouch for your name and present you in a positive light until the people of Ludnica no longer fear you. Wouldn't that be wonderful? If you become indeed more popular than my camp, then I will advise my supporters to vote for you. The opposite is of course also the case. I expect your followers to support me should I win this bet. This way the slim possibility existed that her partner could still uphold her promise to Rosewall. Tanya wouldn't let it come to that, but most likely the people would be too bigoted either way to see her as anything other than a witch. Do you want to know what the best part about this deal would be? Our chances of winning the royal selection will increase drastically. Even if both of us would get less votes individually than the other candidates, together we will be nigh unstoppable if we play our cards right. Whoever of us both becomes the victor will have the votes of 2 whole camps behind her. Leah, is that really the best decision? Asked Puck worriedly. Before he could sway Amelia from her side, Tanya intervened. It is the perfect proposal. This way you will not lose your pride and Rosewall not his hope of you succeeding in the end. We will benefit both and you will be secure no matter what happens. Either you become queen and fulfill your wishes, or you are a close friend of the queen, who will fulfill your wishes. You cannot fail with this method. I think Rosewall would agree to this. I accept. Tanya grinned and stretched our hand to shake. It was not the final decision, but with these words the half-elf had basically sealed her fate. Excellent. We will be a glorious team. Note, Brew, Captain Imaginat, chill out. As much as you want me to kill all the bad guys and expose Rosewall, it makes no sense for that to happen until the events of the Sanctuary arc. Please stop begging me to do it. The Freudian excuse is no excuse trope doesn't even apply to Rosewall's character. He acts out of obsessive love, not out of vengeance. How can you hate Rosewall so much, dude? I am thankful that you are so engaged with my story, but there is no need to demand the same thing over and over again. Have a nice day, smiley face. Anyways. Who is your favorite Re-Zero character? Who do you think should get more screen time in my story? Chapter 31, Sealing the Deal. Now that she had gotten Amelia's verbal agreement to their alliance, she needed only to accomplish 2 more objectives. Convince Rosewall and actually write the treaty. Well, she hoped this wouldn't end up being too difficult. She had experience with legal documents, and knew the required formal characteristics well. Nonetheless, it took a whole day for her to come up with the exact ramifications of their contract. Normally, in a more civilized world this process would have taken weeks of careful consideration and discussion from both parties, but Tanya doubted that Emilia was familiar with such office politics. Also, this allowed her to build in some loopholes that she could later chalk up as unintentional. Tanya truly wanted this relationship to prosper, and to do that she needed trust, but always having a backup plan was a must for her. The second she had reread her alliance proposal and checked for errors, she made her way to Rosewell's office door and knocked. Margrave Mathis. Yes, Lada de Guchaf. Please enter. I trust that Lady Emilia has told you about our arrangement already. She presented it like it was already made official. This would surely force him to comply with most of her wishes if he didn't want to upset his chosen candidate. Not quite, but I have a vague idea. Rosewell's smile was slightly unsettling as always. He almost certainly knew far more than he let on, which was unnerving, because Tanya never knew if she had played him, or he was the one playing her. Just like that bastard being X. So you do know that we both plan to work closely together in the following years in order to achieve a glorious future for Ludnica. We will share information, resources and manpower between our camps to support each other as best as we can. How intriguing. He drawled. Tanya couldn't help but ask herself again why this clearly competent and intelligent man had to use that stupid accent of his. It sounded absolutely retarded. She forced a smile. Yes. It is a marvelous idea, isn't it? We both will be equals in this alliance who provide for each other. This way we can make sure that one of us wins the throne with near certainty. Whoever of us both gains more public support by the end of the royal selection also gains the votes of other, basically doubling their influence. A simple and fair system, if I say so myself. Both options were good for. It was not like she actually wanted to be queen of a medieval country, so she would be more than happy to hand over the responsibility to someone she could indirectly control like the half-elf. Should the state of affairs require political intervention, then she could probably move her good friend Emilia to follow the best course of action. Otherwise she would enjoy a more comfortable position as a noble with good relations to the crown. Maybe she could become a strategist in the army. Rarigan had loved his job after all. Food for thought. Of course, to accomplish this we need your agreement, as well, Rosewell. Without your cooperation, we will not be able to undertake this important endeavor. Your decision is going to shape our future. Stroking someone's ego to make them feel generous was a technique as old as time itself. Hopefully some good old-fashioned bootlicking would do the trick to sway him to her side. I admit that I also seek your approval for selfish reasons. She tried her best to look embarrassed by sheepishly fiddling with her hands and looking down at the ground. My wonderful sponsor in the royal selection is Reinhard van Astria, who is not only an incredible charitable individual, but also the current sword saint. I myself have been lauded as the greatest combat mage in the world in my homeland. You see, I do not question Lady Emilia's skills as a spirit arts user, but I must sadly say that her combat capabilities unfortunately cannot measure up to my camp. You, Margrave Mathis, on the other hand, are often called the strongest magician in Ludnica, and are certainly quite adept on the battlefield. Her piercing gaze met his and she smiled, hoping that he got the hint. Indeed. It would only be fair if I participated in the bargain to properly compensate you for your no doubt extraordinary abilities. Good. She wouldn't have to spell it out for him. Yes. That was the idea. Does that sound acceptable to you? More than acceptable. He laughed creepily. In that case, I have already prepared a document in duplicate for you to read through and sign if you agree. It details the nature of our future relationship in more detail, but it is basically nothing I haven't told you about. Reading them will nonetheless take some time, because of all legal clauses, I am sure you understand. Perhaps I should come back in an hour or two to give you time. I wouldn't want to pressure you in any way. No, it is quite all right. I have complete trust in you, Lady de Guachaf. She suppressed a grin. What fool didn't read the contract he was about to sign? That was such an amateurish mistake to make. Didn't he realize that the future of this country could be at stake? He couldn't possibly already know what was written on the paper, he just validated with his signature, could he? No, that would be impossible. Tanya promptly thanked Rosewell for his time, and bid him farewell, with 2 signed copies of the treaty in hand. Because the Margrave was Amelia's sponsor, and de facto caretaker, she technically wouldn't need the half-elf's acknowledgement as well, but her signature would make it more official. It would irrefutably prove that the whole Amelia camp had unanimously agreed to Tanya's terms. So, her next destination was her new business partner's study. She had originally sought out Rosewell first, because it would seem rude of her to not ask the lord of the house first, but it also served the function to pressure the half-elf into agreeing should that abominable Puck manage to dissuade her from the alliance. No. Her thoughts were too negative. Tanya tried to slip into a more positive mindset to fool the emotion-reading spirit. If looked at objectively, then his protectiveness of Amelia was admirable. Really. It was a good trait that would keep her associate safe from dangerous individuals, which in turn would lighten Tanya's workload. Puck was good. Nice even. She forced herself to smile again, while she walked through the seemingly endless corridors. The sweet, benevolent upturn of her lips was so unlike her normal persona that any knowing onlooker would have fled in fear if they had seen this smile. One knock on the door was all it took for Amelia to call out to enter. Ah, hello Tanya. Did the meeting with Rosewell go well? He agreed rather enthusiastically. Here, see for yourself. She handed her the signed contract. Would you please grace me with your signature as well? Leah, shouldn't you read it first, said the lovely spirit. The Margrave already gave his consent, but if you doubt me and his judgment, then go on and read the treaty thoroughly. I will be back in an hour, because I do not wish to sit here idle and twiddle my thumbs during the duration of your study. If the trick had worked on Rosewell, who was a far more conniving individual than Amelia, then she could try it her too. Implying that the act of checking the contract was not only a breach of trust, but also boring would hopefully be enough to deter the girl from trying. Even Tanya herself had not always been immune to such guilt-tripping. Only if her adjutant had used her adorable puppy eyes had she fallen to the temptation. It was hard to say no to Visha. Oh, no. Sorry. I didn't mean it like that, she cried, followed by the furious scratching of a quill on paper. The girl was so pathetically easy to manipulate that she couldn't help but intensify her smile. The slip-up from angelic to predatory only lasted a few heartbeats, but was noticeable to any perceptive observer. She imagined that the currently invisible Puck was glaring at her in this moment, but he obviously didn't interfere, or else Amelia would have stopped putting her signature under the document. What a relief. Still, it was not good that she had to depend on the wonderful spirit's complacency. Beatrice would surely know of a way to protect one's mind against spirits. Immediately after this whole ordeal was over, Tanya would need to ask her. Indeed, it took only a short conversation and a warm handshake to seal the deal, after which she excused herself again and went to her room. It was done. The alliance was officially made, and she had secured herself not only the help of the court magician Margrave Mathis, but also basically unlimited access to the Forbidden Library and 2 great spirits. Her odds of survival were going up. A time for celebration would come later though, at the Astria mansion. REM. Good to see you. I was wondering if you knew where I could find Subaru. I am in need of his assistance in finding the library again. As far as I know, Subaru decided to go to the village earlier, Lady de Guchaff. He wanted to play with the kids one last time before we depart to the capital tomorrow. That is troublesome. Also, you said we. Will you accompany us? Yes, milady. REM shall drive the coach. 2 coaches. There is no need. Subaru can ride with me. Seeing as both our camps are now in an alliance, I am going to provide the means of transportation for his return, of course. I am terribly sorry, Lady de Guchaff, but those were Lord Rosewell's orders. Also, with which carriage do you plan to depart in any way? With my own, of course. The one I came here with. Pardon this, milady, but it seems as if the driver that brought you here has not returned from the capital as of now. Indeed. Or else he would have reported to her already. What was going on? Her instructions had clearly been for him to return the day before her departure. Well, the day wasn't over yet, so maybe he was just late, and would show up soon. Nonetheless, was it good to plan for the eventuality that he didn't return from the capital altogether? Then I am to assume that I will be traveling with you should my servant not show up here in time, asked Tanya. Yes, that is correct, milady. REM will deliver you home, as per her master's orders. Speaking of yourself in third person was never a good sign. Tanya hoped that the poor girl had no personality disorder. How perceptive of Rosewell to notice the absence of my staff before me. I am glad that he keeps such a close eye on my well-being. Give him my thanks. Inwardly she was fuming. Had the man arranged for her driver to disappear on the way here? Was this an elaborate trap for him to get rid of her? Tanya could already imagine dozens of scenarios in which REM accidentally drove the carriage away from the main road deep into the woods and tried to assassinate her there away from any potential witnesses. But no. That would make no sense. He had just agreed to their alliance and had no reason to make an enemy out of one of his most important allies. Killing her now was foolish and extremely dangerous. If he wanted to finish her off, then he would do so himself. Only powerful magic really worked against powerful magic after all. Such an important duty would not be left to a mere maid and a childish butler. Maybe he wanted her to know that he was in control of their relationship by demonstrating that she was at his mercy. If so, then she was not impressed. Should he be the culprit behind the disappearance of her driver, then he would pay for that. Wasting human resources like that was unforgivable. Before Earlham village was even visible to her, she already heard Subaru's voice. "Victory," he shouted. "Victory," answered the crowd. "And don't forget to do this every morning. Radio calisthenics is important to keep your bodies healthy and your minds focused. When I hear that you have diligently followed my instructions, then I will even bring you a gift from the capital. It will be super cool." "Yay!" howled the kids that surrounded him in apparent glee. For this backwater village, the largest city in Lugnica, was probably an exotic place. Physical training was indeed an important part in keeping yourself in shape and ensuring optimal work efficiency. Even in her first life, as a salaryman, she had exercised daily to stay fit and minimize sick days. A healthy mind needed a healthy body. Long years of sitting behind a desk and working on a computer back then had prevented her from ever becoming buff, as Newman would have called it, but she had been not unmuscular. Of course that had been when she still had a male body, so it had been easier to get strong in contrast to being a malnourished little girl. Course you being X. If Subaru understood this, then perhaps they could get along better than anticipated. "Hello, Subaru. Are you finished with your business here?" "Oh, hey Tanya. Yes, I am. Nice of you to visit me. I knew you couldn't go a single day without me." "Perhaps not. No. I require your help in finding the forbidden library." "Again? Oh? And you walked all the way out here just to fetch me?" "I don't know if I believe that," he teased. "What other option did I have? Opening every door in the mansion is hardly a better alternative." "Really? I am flattered that you trust my ability to find her so much, but have you not asked Biko how the door crossing works?" "No. What does that have to do with anything?" He looked at her like she was stupid. She didn't like that. It made her wish to bring out her shovel. Biko is connected to every door in the mansion. She can feel them all. If you want to talk with her, then you just need to open one and ask her to put a portal there, you know. She gave him a long, deadpan stare before she finally broke the suffocating silence. "Really?" Her tone was so completely flat, and not amused, that Subaru visibly cringed away from her. "Why, yes. All secrecy and subtly be damned." She suddenly pushed mana into her computation jewel and took off like a flash of lightning, leaving a shaken Subaru in the dust. Chapter 32 Brewing Storms. The day of parting had come. After a night of copying as many books from the library as possible with a combination of her computation jewel and good old-fashioned notes, Tanya was rather exhausted. An old saying in the command staff had been, "Sleep is only for the dead." So better work hard and earn your right to die. While she had never fully agreed with the sentiment, because proper rest was essential for a good work mentality, she could understand where the other officers had been coming from. She certainly felt like dying after 2 nights without sleep. This got only worse with each day that passed without coffee. When breakfast was served, she would have gladly sacrificed an ear or a finger for just a single cup, but alas, this underdeveloped, barbaric, unenlightened country had not been blessed by the wonders of caffeine yet. No doubt being X was responsible to spite her. It was no wonder that as a result of all these unfortunate factors, she barely registered the heartfelt farewells from a certain half-elf. Emilia's tearful separation from Subaru went also unnoticed by the grumpy Tanya. The worst part of the morning, though, was that her driver had still not shown up. A highly suspicious event that made her extremely uneasy. Thanks to her missing coacher, she needed to drive in Rosewell's carriage just like REM had predicted yesterday. The whole affair just reeked of a thinly veiled assassination plot, but she had no choice but to comply, because Rosewell had made it quite clear that he wished for her to leave now, and straining their budding relationship so soon was not an option. Her 2 bodyguards helped with stowing away her belongings on the carriage. Tanya had honestly kind of forgotten these 2 even existed, considering that she hadn't needed them for anything and they had stayed mostly in their room. Regardless of their actual usefulness though, having a meat shield just in case was always good. One of them positioned himself on the back of the carriage, and the other on the front besides REM. Officially this served the purpose to make more space indoors for her and Subaru, but her real reason had been to provide her with a lookout on the road behind them, and a surveillance of the blue-haired driver. After the mysterious disappearance of her original coacher, she was understandably paranoid. Well, more paranoid than usual. With the last of her energy she put on what she liked to call, salesman smile, and thanked her business partners for the stay, before she boarded the carriage and dozed off as soon as they left the gates. Her fellow passenger, Subaru, wouldn't have noticed this though, because she remained seated upright, and had an illusionary formula laid over her eyes to look like they were open. This useful trick had saved her many times during important staff meetings in the past when she had been forced to attend after just dropping out of an active combat zone. Sometimes a 15-minute power nap was all it took to restore a minimum of much-needed energy, and she could record and replay everything that was said during her sleep anyway. So it wasn't like she missed anything by doing so. Yes, it was dangerous for her to sleep inside the carriage that she suspected to be a trap, but she was pretty certain that Rosewell would not let anything incriminating happen to while on his territory. Subaru was also a negligible threat that she didn't need to worry about. He was a soft boy from an industrialized age of reason and progress, so he wouldn't resort to random murder all of a sudden. He had no weapons on him anyway. She checked. Nonetheless, she slept with her strongest passive barrier activated. You never knew when someone decided to snipe you from a distance, or drop a bomb on your head after all. Afterwards she felt a little bit better, and decided to engage her temporary companion in conversation to form more of a personal connection with him. His knowledge and access to Emilia made him valuable enough to spend her time on him despite his annoyingly unprofessional behavior. Dealing with real children without either a propaganda camera team or a gun on hand was not her strong suit. And then the massive beast stared at me like it was gonna eat me, but I still had a trick up my sleeve. I cast my last shamak and jumped just in time to. Suddenly Subaru stopped mid-sentence and became deathly still. His once joyful eyes glazed over and he began to shake. "What's wrong, Subaru? Can you hear me?" she asked in worry. When he didn't respond, her reflexes took over, and she instinctually fell back into combat mode. Tanya had seen this look of shock and distress on the faces of many young recruits. Whatever trauma had gotten a hold of the boy warranted immediate treatment. "Come back to me, soldier. Focus on me. Yes? Now look me in the eyes and follow my instructions. I am here and I can help. Breathe in slowly, just like that, and breathe out. You are doing fine. Keep focused, soldier. Calm breaths. And stay focused. What is going on back there, Lady Diguchav? Is Subaru all right? Should I stop the carriage?" asked a distraught REM from the outside. Everything is under control. He just had a panic attack. There is not much that we can do for him right now, so I am going to find out what caused this. She gripped Subaru's hand while still fixating his gaze with her own. Subaru, if you understand me, please nod. He nodded slowly with his empty eyes still staring unblinking into the distance. One thought and a myriad of microcalculations was all it took for her to produce a small, bright light on her fingertip, which she used to test his pupil afferents. This was standard medical procedure, to check the responsiveness of the optical nerves and by extension the nervous system as a whole. So far his irises contracted adequately when she exposed them to the light. Physically he seemed to be fine. Can you tell me what just happened? Nothing to worry about. I just had a very bad dream, he answered lamely. Tanya frowned. She needed his honesty to assess what was wrong with him. It would be extremely troubling, after all, if a servant of her business partner suffered a mental breakdown while in her care. That would reflect badly on her overall competence. You need to tell me, Subaru. Keeping quiet about your problems makes the mess others have to clean up later only worse. You wouldn't want to burden your superior like that, would you? Amelia turned. Yes. I am sure she would want you to talk about your problems. She seems like that kind of girl. Truthfully, Tanya couldn't care less about the aches and pains of the boy in front of her at the moment. She was way too tired for that, but emotionally manipulating him into opening up would only benefit her in the long run. Abruptly his expression of confusion shifted quickly to one of horror, and then of determination. How intriguing. Oh, yes. I remember now. Tanya, something terrible will happen soon and we need to be prepared for it. Guess that in about half an hour we will reach a fog bank and there is something inside. Subaru shuddered. And how do you know that? That seems awfully precise for a guess. Well, I can really talk about it. Can T or 1T? I cannot, he reluctantly stated. He appeared completely sincere, which was strange. Is it like a curse? Yes. Every time I try to tell someone about it, it feels like my heart is going to explode. The magic in this world was retarded. If not surprisingly useful. Perhaps she could curse her subordinates as well to force them into secrecy. It sounded unethical, but very effective. So this happens more often. Yes. Can you see the future? It was the only logical conclusion, regardless of how asinine it may appear at first glance. In a sense. Yes. Yes, I can see the future. That was incredible. Tanya was now more glad than ever to have the Amelia camp on her side. This was an unbelievably powerful ability to have at your disposal. Even she would be hard-pressed to compete against a foe who could accurately divine the future. How that was even possible in the first place was anyone's guess. Being X, for all his supposed power, had never been able to do so after all. Otherwise he would have noticed long ago that he wouldn't be able to break her. All of that was of course only correct if Subaru spoke the truth, and was not simply lying or hallucinating. She had met enough raving madmen in her last life and didn't need more. No thanks. If I give you the benefit of the doubt here, and choose to believe what you are saying, then that means that you just saw half an hour into the future, where we traveled through some fog, and met something or someone inside, correct? Correct. Do you have perhaps more details? There was a giant eye and then whatever it was gonna eat us. And you made a huge explosion, but it was still going. It almost looked like a really creepy whale. A white one. The white whale, screamed a guard from outside. Out of two things which disappointed Tanya in this moment, she knew not which was more of a disgrace. That the carriage walls offered no privacy, or that her own bodyguards possessed so little self-control. If the description of a white whale could drive the normally stoic men into such frenzy, then the beast must have quite the cultural significance. What could inspire a reaction of fear like this? Oh, no. She had read about the 3 demon beasts that periodically plagued Ludnica, but she had written them off as an overdramatized legend. One of them was the white whale Hakuge, who was said to live within a dreadful fog. Everything matched Subaru's description perfectly. Do you know what else the monster did? After I caused the, quote-unquote, huge explosion. It could fly, I think. Because you were evading it in the sky and it followed you up. A flying whale does indeed sound ridiculous, but it makes somewhat sense. How else would the beast move over the land without legs? But that's not everything. I am not sure about this, but I believe it wasn't only one whale. I mean, in one moment it was alone, but after the smoke had cleared from your explosion it looked like there were 3 of them. Now that made matters much worse. If a beast that couldn't be killed for 400 years was not already bad enough, then they stood no chance against 3 of them. We have to stop the carriage, yelled a guard, as if mirroring her thoughts, to which the other responded, this is suicide. Tanya leaned out of the window and created an optical formula to enhance her eyesight. A holographic display of green numbers and lines formed in front of her face and focused on a spot in the distance. A gigantic wall of white mist was indeed obscuring the horizon, and approached them rapidly. "REM, can you please turn the coach around? We are going back to the mansion." "I fear that is impossible without stopping, milady. The road is much too narrow for that." "What is the problem? If we just stop and slowly turn around, then that shouldn't be an issue." "Lady de Guerchaf, the divine protection of wind evasion will not be able to be used again by this ground dragon if we were to interrupt his run. We would have to travel at a much slower pace for several hours before he can recharge it. So, the choice was either to turn around at a comparatively glacial speed and hope that Hakuge wouldn't catch up with them, or keep going in its direction." "Wonderful. Subaru, did we make it out alive?" she whispered in order to not frighten the guards. "I have no clue." "At least I didn't," he said gloomily. Tanya couldn't afford to lose such a valuable resource. Not now, when she had just discovered his incredible potential. With his help she could discern threats before they even became reality. Subaru was invaluable. To save him she needed more information. "How big was the explosion you saw me create?" "Pretty big. Like at least 12 meters in diameter." That meant she had been serious in Subaru's vision, but it had apparently not been enough. Had she been desperate enough to? No, hopefully not. She had to find out. "Did anything unusual happen before I cast that spell?" "No. You just flew up and shot at it." That was a relief. Sadly, she hadn't brought her gun. Only her pistol could be used as a catalyst for her magic. As a result, she practically had no ranged combat options. Tanya would need to fight tooth and nail if she wanted to accomplish the impossible. Her mental boosters kicked in, and her bloodstream was flooded with artificial drugs. The only visible sign that she was nearly overloading her brain with enhancement magic was that her eyes began to glow an eerie cerulean blue. A small eternity of 6 seconds was all it took for her to work out a strategy. This was going to suck, but she now had a plan of action. "REM, drive as fast as you can. We are going through the fog." "I have plan." Chapter 33 Regrets and Findings. Tanya knew that they probably stood no chance against the monster, which had been a constant source of gruesome legends for generations. Rumored to be the spawn of the jealous, which sent to torment the good people of Lugnica, it remained undefeated for centuries. Despite not even having to do with the thematic of the respective chapter, she had read multiple times about the white whale in the history books as an allegory for certain defeat. If a fully prepared army could not defeat such a creature, then her probability of success practically equaled 0. Luckily, she wouldn't need to kill it to achieve what she was going for. It was, at the end of the day, when you took everything into consideration, just an animal. A large, magical and extremely dangerous animal, but an animal nonetheless. And animals followed basic instincts that could be predicted. What could be predicted could be influenced. And what could be influenced could be manipulated. That at least was the basis of her main plan, and she was relatively sure she could pull it off. Her expertise was fighting huge groups of human targets, both on land and in the air, which was far different from what she was now attempting, but the white silver, the ace of aces, the angel of the empire was anything if not adaptable. The greatest problem in her strategy was that Subaru had foreseen 3 of them at once. Distracting and mock-engaging, one beast was difficult enough, but handling 3 of them would be almost impossible. Almost. Ram, can you cast magic? She asked. Yes, milady. I am proficient enough with water spells. Good. Can you heal? Yes, but only minor wounds. I unfortunately never really got to train the healing arts. It will be enough, assured Tanya. She checked her equipment once more to make sure everything was at its right place. Spare bullets, magazines, her pistol, the cutlass, her combat knife and multiple other miscellaneous items. Good. Now began Phase 1. Listen up, everybody. I have no time to explain, but I know what I am doing. Despite how miserable our situation seems, I can promise you that you are nowhere as safe as with me. She couldn't promise that in fact, but morale had to be upheld somehow to keep this impromptu team functioning. Lying to your troops before battle could end up poorly, but history had shown it to be an effective tool most of the time. Our mission appears hopeless, but I have fought against worse odds single-handedly, and come out on top. If you follow my orders, then I will guide you to safety. It will not be easy, but we all are going home if you can trust me on this. This was also a lie. In case of an emergency, she was perfectly prepared to sacrifice her 2 guards as bait. They were expendable. Reinhard would not be happy, but it would ultimately be easier to explain than the loss of her allies' subordinates. Not letting anyone voice their doubts, she quickly continued, turning tail and fleeing is impossible, as I have no estimation of how fast we could accomplish that. Either we would manage to escape and possibly lead the monster to the Mathis domain, or the fog would catch up to us anyway. By continuing forward at full speed, we will pass through the mist as fast as possible. The only problem? The white whale is in there. If the strange mist had any similarities to naturally occurring fog, it would not only impede vision, but muffle sound as well. The whale would need to rely on another form of orientation to find prey and direct its movement to it. Most logical would either be a keen sense of smell, or a manner-sensing ability similar to one of her formulae. It was a magical creature, after all, so nothing was impossible. Identifying and subsequently triangulating the exact position of a mana signature had been standard procedure back in the Empire. Even the Francois had been able to do it, so an animal should have no problem. Because both these potential senses were rather vague, the beast would search out the bigger, more delectable source if it had to choose between 2 targets. Radiating excess mana and dousing herself in blood would make her the more alluring victim in the white whale's mind, which would hopefully keep the beasts from immediately going after the carriage. Now I am going to fly a few hundred meters away and distract the whale. I will silence a few parts of the carriage as best as I can, but the spells will not hold for long, so be quiet and slow down under no circumstances. Winfried and Tog, you are going to relocate inside the cabin and keep the windows closed. Don't talk, don't sob. Avoid all noise. The last part was especially important, so she made sure to stare Subaru deep in the eyes when she said it. For some reason he looked offended. Keeping the noise of the driving coach to a minimum was a task as important as it was difficult. The sheer mana expenditure of holding up several spells over long distances was enormous, but necessary. In a normal, hour-long tactical engagement it would have been unthinkable to waste energy like that, but these were far from normal circumstances. If nothing went wrong, as it always did, then they would cross the fog before her mana ran out. REM, if I tell you to drive right, you will change course as fast as possible. If I tell you to drive left, the same applies. Do you understand? Yes, Lady de Guchaf, came the composed response from the maid. That girl had seemingly more backbone than her own bodyguards. Maybe she should hire her, but the Margrave was unlikely to part with such an excellent servant. If I do not return after you leave the fog, then don't wait for me. I can take care of myself and fly back to the capital if I have to. Do not stop until the ground dragon faints from exhaustion. Tanya did not wait for acknowledgement before she opened the door and flung herself outside. What would have been a potentially lethal jump for any normal person was nothing to worry about for a trained aerial mage of her caliber. Years' worth of instincts kicked in and stabilized her mid-air even though the wind dragged heavily at her deceptively diminutive form. With a boost in power that created a small shockwave behind her, she took off in the direction of the rapidly approaching mist. Meanwhile, her fingernail flickered and extended into a tiny, bright glowing cutting edge. Carefully, in order to not cut too deep with her razor-sharp mage blade, she skimmed over the surface of her skin and opened up shallow wounds all over her body. Blood flowed freely and ruined her tattered clothing further. A pity. She had liked the shirt. At the current rate that her heart was pumping, she calculated that she would suffer from symptoms of anemia in 23 minutes and 14 seconds. More than enough time to get the job done, hopefully. Of course, her enhanced metabolism as a mage meant that her blood already had begun to clog, and she would need to reopen fresh lacerations in a few minutes to prevent the old ones from healing. But it was good to stay safe. Dying from self-inflicted wounds after all the tribulations she had been through would be a cosmic joke that she wouldn't grant being X. Now she properly reeked of blood, and her high man output would make her even more noticeable. If she hadn't grossly miscalculated, then she would be irresistible for the beast. Maybe a bit of auditory stimulation would also be beneficial. Where are you, monster? Do you crave human flesh? Don't let my appearance fool you. I am the tastiest one around. It sounded lamer than she had initially though, but the white whale most likely couldn't understand her flimsy taunts anyway. Everything that mattered was that she was loud and smelled appetizing. Luring it a good distance away was top priority, and then the real fun could begin. Subaru was more than a little afraid, and with good reason. Apparently this white whale was an even bigger deal than he thought and seemed nigh invulnerable. Not to mention that the terrible beast had already killed him once, and the strongest person at the moment was not here to protect him. Well, dying was a far less scary prospect for him than any other person in the world, but that didn't make it any less uncomfortable. If worst came to worst, he could simply restart and try something different. It was a blessing as much as a curse, because he was confronted with his mistakes again and again. Why did he have to be so powerless? Why did he have to be so weak? He scowled at his inability to fight that stupid whale. Now Tanya had to go out there and save his sorry ass, because he was too weak. He should be the hero of this story and face all problems head on, but instead he ran away like a little child. It was simply not fair. Everybody saw him as a nuisance. By now his fear had turned into rage. He was angry at the whale, at the world, and mostly at himself. He would be no longer useless. He would impress Emilia and show the world that Subaru Natsuki was not a pushover. He would not let them down anymore. In that moment all he could think about was his blinding fury, and reason or self-preservation no longer mattered to him. His mind fell into a frenzy of negative emotions, which led to a decision that would alter the course of the fight. In a heartbeat he was up from his seat and rushed to the door of the carriage. With all his desperation and anger he nearly ripped the handle off as he opened it and leaped into the open. And then pain. As it turns out, jumping out of a fast-moving vehicle onto hard ground was not a pleasant experience. He couldn't help but whimper in agony for a few moments before he mustered enough strength to stand up. Every bone in his body seemed to ache, and he was sore everywhere. All in all, a typical day for Subaru. Nothing out of the ordinary. The carriage had already disappeared in the thick white fog that was surrounding him, and everything was eerily silent. It felt like the whole world had been swallowed by the milky miasma, and he was all alone. Slowly doubts were beginning to form in Subaru's mind. Fear resurfaced and cleared the haze of irrational anger away to reveal a growing list of second thoughts. Maybe this had not been such a great idea after all. Indeed it hadn't, as the tomb-like silence was ripped apart by an ear-piercing screech and intelligible yelling. What was going on? Now that he had probably already doomed himself, he was going to investigate. Information would be the key to defeating the monster next time, he was sure of it. Maybe he could even be useful and aid Tanya in whatever she was doing. Again and again the horrible screech nearly forced him to his knees, but he was coming closer. He wouldn't give up now. Although it was pretty difficult to find the location of the battle, because he could barely see his own feet in the mist. Suddenly though everything became quiet again, and he feared for the worst. Had Tanya lost? Was she killed? Where even was she? That question got answered as subtly as if God himself had extended his finger and pointed at her location. Golden light pierced the fog and seemed to nearly split the heavens themselves. Brilliant radiance exploded with such brightness that he had to avert his eyes even with the mist obscuring the land around. It was so overwhelming that felt a flaw in pure, or at the power that was consuming everything in his vicinity. Subaru wouldn't have been surprised if someone on the moon could see whatever was happening in front of him. Interlude 2. Far off in the depth of the far reaches of space, in a particularly chaotic junction of the infinite multiverse, an entity only called Being X by his most ardent detractor was seething. His lost lamb, his little atheist, was still missing, and he had found no lead on her whereabouts. Who had stolen her away? Who dared to ruin his favorite pet project? He raged in fury and indignation about her unexpected disappearance so much that he was practically unaware of the time he wasted on his mad quest. His own worlds remained unattended and millions of souls were denied passage to the afterlife, because he was not there to reincarnate or otherwise process them. Instead he had spoken with countless other gods and creatures that exceeded mortal imagination, and asked them for help in his feverish search, but most of them had simply ignored him. They would all pay for their disrespect. Like Aqua, who had just plugged in earphones and watched some terrible TV show instead of listening to his extremely important massage. Cos of the great deep sea had at least tried to be of use to him, but her very nature was incomprehensible even for him, and her words had only confused him further. Truth had nearly been equally as cryptic, and on top demanded a price for his services. Laughable. Didn't he know who he was talking to? Being X was far too great to be charged with prices like a simple human. The insolence. And so he aimlessly scoured the multiverse, throwing world after world into chaos and peril when he looked under every leaf and stone to find his rightful possession. Although no matter how hard he looked he could never find his plaything. Even his near-infinite patience was running thin, and he was secretly considering giving up for a while when he suddenly felt a familiar sensation tugging at the edge of his perception. There it was. His glorious power that he had graciously bestowed upon the ungrateful mortal was being used, and he could feel it. With great haste he threw the world he was currently inspecting away into the eternal abyss, and rushed to the origin of the feeling. It was a magical world governed by a crystal called the OD Laguna, but he couldn't care less. What could a measly crystal of magical energy do against him, the perfect existence? There were also other powerful entities present, but he wasted no time on studying their pitiful lives. Compared to him they were, of course, nothing. With a ripple in reality foretelling his arrival, he descended upon the heavenly plane of this world and searched for the traces of his energy. A few moments of concentration was all it took for his divine mind to comprehend the entire geography of the planet and track his little non-believer down. Now he had her back. She was his once again. Oh, he couldn't wait to make her pay for all the trouble she had caused him. Suffering for 1,000,000 years would not be enough to appease him. Just as Being X was preparing to pluck her from this world again and bring her back to his domain, something unexpected happened. He couldn't do it. What? He tried to do anything at all. And he failed to move even a nanometer. What in his holy name was happening? Only now did he realize that the entire world seemed to have stopped moving. Like when he communicated with Lost Lamb, but this wasn't supposed to happen to him. He was a god. He was above such petty tricks to all mortals. Why couldn't he move? Deep purple shadows were beginning to slowly encroach on him and practically oozed pure malevolence. They were darker and deeper than anything he had expected from this unimpressive world. He had to admit he had not expected anything here to challenge him. "You cannot be allowed to ruin my plans," whispered a surprisingly beautiful, but at the same time distorted voice directly into his mind. His skin would have crawled if he had any. "And why is that? Who does so boldly speak to me?" No response. He got angry. "The little human is mine and only mine. She needs to help my beloved. I want her back. You are nothing to me. Leave me alone before I obliterate you, he screamed in equal parts unease and irritation. I will not permit that. Suddenly a second, more youthful voice chimed in and seemed to address the first one. It appeared to be female in origin as well. My, how interesting. You are after Tanya, right? Free me. I am a god. You are not even worthy of my attention. Tremble and bow Beth. The false god was silent, she calmly stated, as if fate had already decided that outcome, and to his growing horror, he found himself unable to speak. See? Much better now. Leave it to me, said Ella. You don't need to worry about him messing with your beloved anymore. Better kill him now. The girl sighed and emotionlessly said, the Witch of Envy was back in the Pleiades watchtower, and had never encountered or noticed this false god here. From one moment to the next the dark, shadowy presence was gone, as if she had never been there to begin with. So what do I do with you now? Being X, she asked with unnerving gentleness. In this moment he realized that he should have let the atheist go, and forgot about the whole affair altogether, when he had the chance. This was not worth it. For the first time in his existence Being X was afraid. And rightfully so. Chapter 34 Invoking Confusion. She had begged for the monster to show itself, and it heeded her call. Barely a few seconds after her entering the fog and screaming for the beast to get her, a giant object pushed through her detection spell with astounding speed. Something as big as a whale was easy to pick up on with a simple sensory formula, but the downside of that size was that in just a few moments it had already traversed half of her effective range. At least Tanya felt satisfied with her hypothesis that the white whale oriented itself via smell or manner sensing. Due to her moving through the mist at moderate speed, it should have been impossible for the monster to track her, but so it did. Just where were the other two that Subaru had told her about? Were they hiding? Or worse, were they working together to ambush her? The last possibility implied an uncomfortable level of intelligence and skill from the creatures. She would need to be extra cautious. For now she could use the isolation of the first whale to her advantage. Tanya had no hopes of actually killing the monster, so weakening and incapacitating it were her goals instead. To do so she would attempt to cripple its mobility first and then ground it for a while before she did the same to the other two creatures. With some luck they would even come out of hiding to aid their wounded comrade. On the flip side, this would become a problem fast if there were in fact more than 3 whales. With its impressive velocity the creature was closing in on her position fast, so she decided to test his willingness to pursue her. While loudly chanting the imperial anthem, she turned at a seemingly physics-defying angle and flew straight up. A quick glance over her shoulder revealed that the dark shape in the fog was still following her with apparently no difficulty. Its current speed correlated to roughly 50% of her maximum speed, so she would be able to outmaneuver it at close range easily. Not to mention that she was a small target to hit. Deciding to surprise the beast a bit, she promptly changed direction again, and flew directly towards it. In one smooth motion she unsheathed her black cutlass, and channeled mana through the shimmering blade. Let us see how well you bleed, she grinned. An unintended side effect of the artificial combat drugs that she was pumping through her system was a heightened bloodlust. Moreover, this got worsened because she didn't have to hold back, due to her foe being an animal. No human rights or martial laws applied to this situation to limit her, not that had ever stopped her before. Those kinds of regulations didn't even exist in this world. She had checked. Closing in rapidly on her target she readied her blade and dodged at the last moment, with a burst of flight magic. While she avoided the gaping maw of the giant creature she made eye contact with it. Its big, strangely expressive eye was an obvious weak spot, and she showed no mercy, as she drove her blade straight through the middle. Blood and vitreous fluid splashed her front, as she opened the eye up from one end to another. A scream of rage and pain followed. From her close proximity to its mouth her eardrums were nearly blown apart, had she not reflexively deafened herself to the noise with a formula, like she had done with thousands of explosions before. Seeing as her slash had achieved moderate success, she continued with her attack. Reinforced blows cut through the whale's hide like butter, and blood sprayed in comically large volumes. Tanya idly wondered how high the beast's blood pressure must be to produce such fountains of life fluid. She struck again and again and again, until its body was littered in shallow lacerations. Regardless how much the creature tried to turn and twist, its large body was unable to reach the much more mobile aerial mage assaulting it from all sides. Honestly, so far this creature had not provided a decent challenge. As much as he detested senseless violence, all the years of constant warfare had etched themselves into her mind and changed her. Rationally she tried to avoid combat as much as possible, but now there was a tiny part of her that immensely enjoyed a good fight and thirsted for challenge. Killing and risking her life had never been pleasant, but it was nearly all she could remember. One could perhaps call it a habit or a tradition. This whole affair was taking too long. Bleeding it out would waste precious minutes. The other two whales had not revealed themselves and were possibly already hunting the carriage. She had hoped to lure them to her location, but luck was apparently not on her side today. Only overwhelming force was an option at this point. Without her rifle this meant one thing. Tanya really didn't want to use it. But she had no choice. Not anymore if she wanted to incapacitate the beast for at least a little while. Subaru had foreseen her using a normal explosion against the whale, and in his vision it turned out to be ineffective. Armed with this knowledge it would be the height of foolishness to attempt something similar again, and expect different results. The definition of insanity postulated so. Still, nothing could be as revolting, as demeaning, as utterly disgusting for Tanya, as giving into the alluring curse of her supernatural tormentor. It went against her very being to pray to such a repulsive entity, but this time she had absolutely no choice. With a thought the flow of mana switched from her Type 97 to her Type 95, and the accursed orb above her chest began to glow. As always the treacherous words came easy to her. Too easy. As if she had been born to say them out loud. She wanted to retch. Have faith, brothers and sisters. A familiar, sickening glow spread through her entire being and filled her mind with poisonous cotton candy. Our salvation is near. The words dripped like sweet acid from her tongue, and she had to fight for every moment of lucidity. No man can stand against our might. Righteous wrath for the enemies of God exploded inside her, and the feeling of the implanted emotion sickened her. And no beast can survive our wrath. It felt like she was floating. Pure golden holiness radiated from her body, and she seemed to detach more and more from what was happening in front of her eyes. The whole world was being swallowed by a golden radiance. For the Lord is with us. Yes. It felt so good. God was so wonderful to grace her with even a fraction of his unimaginable power. She needed to thank him more. Pray to him more. Show him her honest worship. He was the rapturous core of her entire existence. She was nothing without him. He would never abandon her and she loved it. Till the end of time. An invisible dam was bursting inside her, and a tsunami of energy was bursting forth, cleansing the impure, tainted abomination in front of her. The creature was an affront to his divine right to rule all sinners. Only he and his followers had the right to spread death and misery, for he was almighty and all-knowing. It was his right. His. The heretical beast let out an ear-piercing shriek, and Tanya laughed in unadulterated bliss. Ha 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 ha. She was the force that would bring judgment to the sinners and reward the faithful, for God was with her. Note, imagine the cover image here. When the miniature sun in front of him began to shrink, Subaru lifted the hand from his eyes in wonder what he was seeing. Never had he experienced anything comparable to the sheer might that had just occurred before him. Even as the light slowly vanished he could still see the white afterimage that had burned itself into his retina. He blinked the temporary blindness away, and stared at the now fogless area. A strong gust of wind must have cleared the field, but he nonetheless couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. Just patches of dirt and grass as far as he could see. Suddenly a gigantic boulder dropped from the sky and smashed into the earth, raising a dust cloud. What was happening? Subaru was highly confused. Tanya. Are you there? He shouted as loud as he could. Greetings, Subaru. Isn't today a wonderful day to punish those that sin against the Lord's creation? She asked while floating down to meet him. Like an angel, a voice in his mind supplied. He was glad that she was okay, but her manic voice sent a shiver down his spine. Gone was the reserved, factual voice that Tanya typically used, and instead it was replaced with an uncharacteristically giddy and cheerful tone, which for some reason sounded rather sinister. What? He stuttered, trying to comprehend the situation. Do you not see it? Our good God has mercifully bestowed a miracle upon us to smite this abomination, and as always his divine light strikes true. Ha ha ha. Subaru looked where she was gesturing at and noticed the slowly dissolving boulder. No. Rocks generally didn't do that, and now that he looked closer the object didn't appear to be stone either. It was charred, roasted flesh. He almost vomited when he realized that these had to be the burned remains of the white whale. Had Tanya's magic done that? Based on her satisfied grin, it seemed likely. Another shiver ran down his back. How powerful was she? And more importantly, what had happened to her? Never before had she shown this twisted smile, the crazy giggling, and those golden eyes. Subaru was pretty sure that her eye color had been blue an hour ago. Hopefully she would turn back to normal soon, because the new Tanya was creepy. Tanya's joyful voice interrupted his increasingly worried thoughts. But my work is not finished yet. It appears as if its foul siblings have decided to come and be purged as well. So be it. She pointed at the sky where two large shadows were clumsily drifting through the air. The other two whales, as Subaru understood immediately. One of them looked to be barely clinging to life, with a huge chunk of his body missing and scorch marks extending from his tail up to his mouth. The other appeared to be in slightly better shape, but had clearly suffered grievous wounds as well if its blackened head was anything to go by. Thank the Lord for his grace, Subaru. Be thankful and pray. Still cackling with joyful laughter, she rocketed into the sky towards the two crippled creatures. Subaru would have felt sympathy for them had the white whale not killed him in his last loop. Not wanting to gaze upon the bloody spectacle above, he turned his sight on the land around him. He slowly turned his head and came abruptly to a stop when he noticed the great accumulation of mounted soldiers a kilometer away staring in his direction. Was that an army? Where the hell had all these soldiers come from? Were they here to help? So many questions, and only one way to find out. Tanya seemed to be distracted with the fight in the air above, so she would without a doubt appreciate it if he went and collected some information. He would finally do something useful. Otherwise the painful jump out of the carriage, and the expected admonishment from REM, would have been for nothing. With resolve in his heart, and determination in his soul, he made his way over to the lady in front of the soldiers, who looked to be in charge. She would surely know what the matter with the small army behind her was. Crush had a splendid day so far. Finally she would secure her standing in the royal selection once and for all. She was of course convinced that she would make for objectively the best candidate, who would help Ludnica the most, but she was not so arrogant to think that victory would come easy. Oh no. Her claim to the throne would need to be earned through much sweat and blood. Only because of her effort would she prove her worthiness to the people. So, to show her military might and tactical expertise, she had vowed to destroy an ancient evil that plagued the land since 400 years ago. What better way was there to endear herself to the hearts of the populace than to rid them of one of their most feared nightmares? The white whale had even managed to defeat the previous sword saint, which had increased its formidable to almost god levels of strength. This beast was a seemingly insurmountable danger. But Crush would demonstrate to the people that humans didn't need to cower in fear before gods and their ilk. Only man was fit to rule the world. Together they would overcome every obstacle and every foe in their path. From the witch's cult to the divine dragon. They would all crumble before the fury of mankind. Ludnica no longer needed these supernatural entities. Sadly, not everybody understood that true freedom required for humans to take destiny into their own hands and become strong in order to defend their personal freedom. Many would ignore her noble ideas in favor of money, or naive idealism, or because they thought somebody else was stronger than Crush. And that worried her. So she had sped up her preparations, as much as she could, and taken to the field the moment any sign of the accursed whale had been reported to her. She could not afford to lay low and wait for the other candidates to make their move first. The future of Lugnica was at stake. Secretly, she would never admit that to anybody, she was most intimidated by the fifth candidate. Even though Tanya von Digutschaf looked like a little girl that had barely reached adulthood, the cold, predatory look in her eyes had been entirely unbefitting of her appearance. When she had shown everybody at the royal selection how her homeland had been decimated, Crush's divine protection of wind reading had detected no lies in her description. If this strange, foreign girl had not found a way to trick her divine protection, then she was a veteran of unparalleled experience. Tanya had knowledge about fighting techniques and magic that were entirely unknown to Lugnica, and that scared the Duchess. The cute, little girl was a hardened killer with many secrets to hide, which made her an absolute wildcard in Crush's plans. Furthermore, Tanya had been the first candidate to form an alliance, even though she didn't know the extent of the agreement between the Digutschaf camp and the Amelia camp. Her informants had only reported that a carriage from the Astria household had accompanied Lady Amelia's coach back to the Mathis estate and returned later without any passengers. That alone showed how much Tanya trusted the Amelia camp, because she obviously intended to stay for quite a while. A puzzling decision, as many of her advisors called it. Amelia was out of all the candidates easily the one with the worst political standing due to her heritage as a half-elf. Her greatest asset was her confusing sponsorship by Margrave Rosewall, who was the strongest magician in the country. The man was odd, but undeniably powerful. Now that Crush thought about it, she realized that Tanya was in a similar situation. She was a foreigner with no political ties to Lugnica, but was backed by the strongest warrior in the world, the Sword Saint Reinhard van Astria. Together they would be unstoppable, regardless of how many troops Crush managed to assemble, or of how many legendary fighters she managed to rally to her banner. Against both the court magician and the Sword Saint, any army in the world would fall. It was not even a question. This prospect became only more worrying when they both were commanded by the aforementioned wildcard, Tanya von Digutschaf. Yes, it seemed like her biggest problem so far would be Tanya. Whatever she did, Crush would need to pay close attention. Of course, that did not mean she would neglect to observe the other candidates as well, but none had the potential to be as unexpectedly disastrous as Lady Digutschaf. All these reasons had brought her here. Indeed, like her scouts had told her, the typical fog that signaled the whale's presence hung heavy over the land. They had been exceptionally lucky to arrive at the right time to catch the normally rather elusive monster. Even though they were near the Mathis domain, she had not dared to contact the Margrave for aid lest he steal the glory of her own operation. The credit for killing the white whale needed to be indisputably attributed to her camp. With her loyal men behind her back, and her trusted sword at her side, she felt ready for anything. This was the moment she had been waiting for 4 years. Especially old Wilhelm was itching for revenge against the monster that took his beloved wife from him. She had planned and prepared for dozens of scenarios and was confident of her victory. She may not have fought in a war like Tanya, but she had been on the battlefield multiple times, and commanding a small army was a task she was intimately familiar with. Together with some of Lugnica's finest warriors and the sword demon himself, she would obliterate the beast. Now was the time. She breathed in deeply and opened her mouth to command the magic casters to fire into the fog to draw the whale out when something unthinkable happened. A blinding flare of golden light pierced through the dense mist. Its dazzling intensity turned a large portion of the fog seemingly yellow and illuminated the fields around even though it was still daytime. "What was that?" shrieked a soldier behind her. "By the Eau de Laguna," muttered another. Whatever magic had been released had been devastating in power. To possess such enormous abilities was incredibly rare. It appeared to be young magic in origin, as well, which only a handful people in the country could cast. Nobody besides Rosewall L. Mathis would be able to accomplish anything like that. Had the Margrave decided to deal with the whale himself before it came too close to his territory? Had all her investments into this mission been for naught? Could fate be so cruel as to deny her victory mere moments away? Had the court magician stolen her hope of making a head start in the royal selection in front of her eyes? No, she would not give in to despair. It would be unbecoming of the future queen, and of her status as a noble, to give up before she even had confirmation. Nothing was certain yet. Until all hope was lost, she would continue with her operation, for such was her duty. The mist surrounding the diminishing light had begun to disperse to reveal three large bodies floating in the air. One of them suddenly dropped and crashed into the ground, while the other two remained floating. They were mostly white in color, but had huge patches of black on them as well. Their shape was like that of a whale. Hold on. Her men soon realized it likewise. Eyes. Is that the white whale? Are there multiple? What? You retelling me there is more than one? Everybody was either too shocked to answer, or broke out into an intelligible mix of curses and prayers. Crush couldn't fault them even though she did not approve of the loss of discipline. Who could have known that the monster of legend had actually at least two twins, of which one appeared to have been killed? She debated with herself if she should advance or retreat. On one hand the whales were clearly weakened, but on the other she hadn't planned for two of them at the same time. What should she do? She desperately needed more information. "Milady. There is someone coming in our direction," whispered a nearby commander into her ear. Indeed, somebody was approaching her. Whoever the stranger might be, they would need to answer to her for this strange phenomenon. This concerned the safety of Lugnica after all. Chapter 35 Insides and Insights. Tanya wanted to make the two beasts that had dared to survive God's divine miracle suffer. Their last wretched thoughts should be pleas for forgiveness to the Almighty One. Of course no such mercy would be granted to lowly beasts. Retribution has come. You shall taste heavenly wrath today. Ha ha ha. Once more she drew her sword and drove it through the thick hide of the less wounded whale. She couldn't allow the wretch to escape, now could she? Her body became near invisible to the unseasoned onlooker, as she flew in a straight line along its belly and opened it up horizontally. Tanya blurred into existence again, for a second, and then continued her work on the other side before the monster even had the chance to scream. Nowhere near as much blood as before oozed from the deep wounds, much to her disappointment. She chose to torment the other monster while her current victim would hopefully recover some strength for the next round of their little game. The black twin, as she mockingly called the specimen, with mostly charred skin, and half of its tail missing, proved to be far more interesting. Tanya silently thanked the Lord that he alleviated her from her boredom. From what remained of its skin it produced a dense fog that raced in her direction. Her instinct told her that this was no normal mist, but instead something far deadlier. Not that it could kill a messenger of God, of course. After evading its initial attack, she opted to play with it in a different way than she had with the other one. Because most of its receptive nerves on the surface of his body had been burned, cutting it yielded suboptimal amounts of pain from the beast. Instead she humiliated it by first relieving its torso of its pectoral fins, and then its head of its eyes. The heretical witch spawn wouldn't need them in hell anyways. After a minute, or so its desperate cries stopped amusing her so logically its accursed existence came to an end. Deciding to finish this waste of skin and bones off, she rammed her arm as deep as she could into the empty eye socket of the creature, until she could feel her fingers pressing into the soft flesh of his incompetent brain. The beast doubled his howling and trashing around, but it was for naught. Tanya would not let her prey escape judgment. Begone, foul monster. Deciding to use something new she learned in this world, she focused mana through her computation jewel into her fingers and supercharged them. El Jawald. Inside the whale's head 5 burning claws of white mana cut into his brain, instantly liquefying it with their heat. The cry of pain and despair stopped and was replaced with the near inaudible sizzling of its meat being cooked from the inside out. Tanya retracted her bloody arm and let the giant carcass drop out of the sky like a dead fish. Praise the Lord. She began to intone, but stopped. Somehow this didn't feel right. Like there was a part of her that was screaming at her to stop. Just a heartbeat ago this joy coursing through her had felt so wonderful, but now it was almost making her dizzy with disgust. What was happening? There was something she couldn't quite grasp. Something she had forgotten. She needed to remember. Remember? Did she not enjoy worshipping God? No. There was no God. Gods in general were an illusion. Yes. They were mental crutches for the weak and hopeless. A scapegoat for all the mistakes humans committed and were too lazy to fix themselves. What? Our harvest this year was ruined. That had to be the work of God, and not our own fault for wrongly fertilizing our plants. Let us offer him a goat to appease him. That will definitely solve the problem. So moronic. People like this were pathetic. Then why had she believed in such a God just a moment ago? There was another puzzle piece that was missing. She recalled her last memories. The fog. The white whale. She had needed to kill it fast. Not enough time. She had activated her Type 95 computation jewel. Being X. That was the name she had given him. And that absolute asshole had just brainwashed her. Tanya couldn't contain her rage any longer. Bastard, she yelled out into the ether. How dare this piece of shit? Someday she would make him pay. She needed to finish this before she made even more of a fool of herself than she already had. Due to how difficult it was to retain information, with the full power of the Type 95 active, she could only hope that she'd done nothing she would come to regret later. Chance was on her side. The only people in a perimeter of a few dozen kilometers should be those inside REM's carriage. In conjunction with the fog obscuring her position, she was optimistic that she hadn't been observed by anyone ranting like a fanatical lunatic. Judging from the disintegrating corpses below her, she guessed that she had finished off at least 2 whales. The only alive one that she could detect was weakly crawling through the sky away from her while showering the ground below it in blood. It would have been humorous to watch it struggle, but she had no time to waste. Flying up to it, she thought of different strategies to dispatch the crippled monster. At the short range, even her pistol became viable, but she chose to preserve bullets. They were too precious for the time being. Alternatively, the whale's slowness coupled with its gigantic size allowed for maneuvers that would be impossible with human opponents. Especially those with magic capabilities. Checking her mana reserves, she deemed the expenditure of more magic acceptable, and tried something new, now that she had the perfect chance to test an idea she had for a while. With a few calculations, Tanya created a small orb-shaped barrier inside the whale, where she presumed his heart to be, and contracted it. Normally a mage shell would only direct force outwards, but if you inverted the shield, then it could form a miniature prison. Capturing enemy mags this way would not function, due to them being able to divert the mana flow at close proximity. Killing or wounding would also work poorly, not to mention that a bullet through the cranium would always be more effective. Groans of pure misery escaped its throat, but the monster was obviously not dead, so she had guessed the position of its internal organs wrong. Practice had only taught her human anatomy, not that of typically aquatic mammals. Another try and the whale regurgitated copious amounts of blood, and began to fall towards the ground. Still not good enough, so she just repeated the procedure inside its brain, with the result finally being satisfactory. The reason why she had initially opted to spare the head was that she intended to preserve it as a trophy. Nobody would believe her otherwise. Vanquishing a threat that had plagued this kingdom for hundreds of years was no easy accomplishment. If she could deliver proof of her victory, then that would surely boost her reputation quite a bit. However, such an act could gather uncomfortable attention as well. If she dominated the royal selection right from the start, the other candidates might feel threatened and organize a violent confrontation, which could devolve into a civil war. She had seen similar things happen with the enemies of the empire after all. Most humans were unfortunately not rational enough to suppress their premature reactions. Furthermore, her ally and business partner Emilia could be alienated if she perceived Tanya announcing her feats as glory hoarding. Her servant Subaru had relayed critical information that had turned the battle in their favor, so the whole endeavor could very much be seen as a group effort. Leaving Subaru out of the story would undoubtedly be perceived as treason or deceit. That meant that Tanya would need to begrudgingly share her achievement with him. However, she couldn't reveal Subaru's special ability to the public. Nobody other than herself and her allies was allowed to catch on to the fact that they could now predict the future. To keep the boy's true involvement a secret, she would need to find a different reason how he had contributed to the fight. It would be most believable if she told the public that Subaru had spotted the white whale and discovered its 2 twins as well, because this was in a twisted way, actually the truth. She would also need to overplay his usefulness to fit her equal partnership with Emilia. The point of contention would be that Subaru was at the end of the day just a butler with no military history to speak of. If she exaggerated his skills too much, then that would become painfully obvious later, and she would turn into a laughingstock. Have you heard that Diguchav needed help from a boy who can't even swing a sword right? How pitiful. She could already imagine the derision among the nobles. Implying that a simple servant could hold his own against the white whale and fight besides Tanya would inadvertently slander her reputation. So she needed to portray him as someone with incredible potential, as well as someone who had not reached said potential yet. Maybe a knight in training would be ideal. Knights were highly regarded as the best warriors of the kingdoms, only outclassed by the royal knights, but the vague descriptor in training could signal anything. Even the most terrible or mediocre performance could be chalked up to being a trainee. Unfortunately, Tanya was in no position to declare Subaru a knight candidate for Emilia's camp. But if a misconception should arise, who was she to deny such claims if the immature boy called himself a knight? Yes, Subaru seemed like the kind of naive fool who would simply love the idea of swinging a sword around. With a bit of outside influence, it would hopefully be easy to convince him to play the role she would give him. As a bonus, he would consequently learn to defend himself, which would ease her workload when she didn't have to worry constantly over the security of one of her most valuable assets. Also, another bodyguard for Emilia would be nice. The careless half-elf went everywhere without visible protection. That practically attracted trouble. Or her mild headache exploded in barely suppressed agony. Why did she have to take care of everybody around her? All of these incompetent people went about their lives without a care in the world and left all the work to her as usual. First she had to fix the empire and now Ludnica. Was the continuous stress of her life another one of being XS curses? Probably. She hadn't had a proper vacation in nearly 2 decades. Someone like Subaru had it far better. Truly, ignorance was bliss. Speaking of the devil, where was he? As she scanned the horizon for his carriage, she noticed said vehicle standing in front of a small army just an MG shot away. Tanya inwardly cursed herself for the critical lack of situational awareness. Her lapse in attention was probably a result of sleep deprivation and rapid mana consumption. Otherwise, she would have never made such a fatal flaw. Or else she would not have survived this long if she had. Optical formulae zoomed in and she reflexively snorted. Even though she lived now in the Middle Ages, people on horseback, or in this case ground dragonback, still gave her Dacia flashbacks. The apparent leader turned out to be the familiar face of Crush Carson. Oh joy! Well, if Subaru and REM were there, she would have to check the situation. Time to make an impression. Subaru was not sure how to feel. Tanya had gone slightly insane. The white whale was being taken care of, or at least stopped for a short while, and he was as useless as ever. Damn it. No, those were unproductive thought. He knew that. Whining would help nobody. Maybe he could convince those soldiers to help Tanya fight. They seemed capable. At least the green-haired girl in the front would have some answers. She was pretty and had a commanding aura surrounding her, so he should probably introduce himself first and explain the state of affairs at hand. Hey there, milady. I am Subaru Natsuki and I am the butler of the awesome, enigmatic, wonderful Lady Emilia. I just wanted to know who, why, all are what you doing here. You see, the white whale is hanging around here. Stunned silence seemingly froze the world for a moment. The patented Subaru charm just worked on everybody, he thought smugly. The green-haired lady in armor recovered first. I am the Duchess Crush Carson and candidate for the throne of Ludnica. We have come to exterminate the threat of the white whale once and for all and put an end to its reign of terror. Awesome. I think Tanya could use some help over there. He turned to point at the battle behind him only to wince, as one of the beasts fell from the sky and raised a large dust cloud upon impact. Or not. Say, Subaru, did you happen to refer to Lady Tanya von Diguchav? Yeah. I guessed you would know her. With the whole royal selection business and all that. Before she could formulate a response, her gaze snapped to his left, and was slightly surprised to see their carriage emerging out of a portion of the remaining fog. It made a straight beeline for them. No, correction, for him. When Rem's visage became visible, she looked utterly fixated on him, and if the dark look she was giving him was anything to go by, then she had nothing pleasant in mind. I messed up, didn't I, thought Subaru. Rem brought the carriage to a grinding halt and gracefully leapt from the front seat to the ground. As always, she bowed prim and proper to the nobility in front of her. Excuse me, Your Highness, but I will have to borrow this unruly servant for a short while. He silently begged Crush with his eyes to intervene, but... Very well. If it does not take too long. Betrayal. Why had she sold him out? Ah? You have my thanks, Lady Carson. With more force than he thought was necessary, the blue-haired maid dragged him behind the coach. Subaru, what were you thinking? She hissed. I. No words wanted to form in his mouth. Rem was terrifying. He had already known that, but chosen to forget. Subaru, why did you do such a reckless thing? Do you want Rem to suffer? What? Of course not. Then why did you risk your life in such a stupid way? Can't you imagine what I would have felt if you had died out there? Without me by your side? Again words were failing him. Did she have feelings for him? Impossible. Rem. Why do you care? I mean, I only became a real employee a few days ago, and it's not like I can get anything right. Without me both you and Ram would be perfectly all right. You managed before. Pain. What just happened? Had she slapped him? And if so, then why so hard? He blinked the tears away only to find out that Rem was nearly crying as well. Don't say such idiotic nonsense, Subaru. Of course you are precious to me. How could you not? You saved me not only from death, but you showed me light in my life again. You gave me hope that I could be something other than my sister's replacement. Thanks to you I can walk my own path, and I want to walk it with you. What dash? Subaru was feeling pretty overwhelmed right now. How could anybody say stuff like that about a worthless boy like him? Yes, he had helped her out a bit, but that hadn't been anything special. With a bit of time, Rem would have realized how amazing she was all by herself without him needing to tell her that. And without him she would have never been in danger of the Mabeasts in the first place. You amazing Subaru. So don't you dare and die on me. We will talk later about this, all right? Her question left no room for argument, and he found himself dumbly nodding along. Stepping back around the carriage, everybody gave him a knowing look which indicated that they had clearly heard everything what had been going on behind the coach. He tried his hardest to turn invisible in order to avoid the embarrassment, but as always the universe seemed to hate him. So, what are we going to do now? He questioned idly while rubbing his hurting cheek. Rem seriously packed a punch. It appears as if we came here for naught. Nonetheless, we should inspect the corpses and determine if Lady Tanya really felled the white whale on her own. Her steely voice betrayed a tiny amount of bitterness, and Subaru could emphasize with her. He would be pretty miffed too if someone pulled a kill steal after a lengthy quest. What flag had the poor woman triggered to deserve this? I understand. Claims of that magnitude require proof. Sadly, at least 2 of the bodies seem to have dissolved already. Huh? Where had Tanya come from? The girl was silent as a ghost. Well, maybe everyone besides him had noticed her approach, because they didn't look nearly as surprised as he did. This day really wasn't the best for all of them. Crush felt hopeless. She had to stand by and watch while her rival defeated not 1, but, somehow, 3 of the most powerful beings in Lugnica, in a matter of minutes, and without help. How could she compare to that? What could she do to surpass this? All her life she had been hailed as a capable warrior and tactician. Someone who would be able to overcome all difficulties that life presented her with. But now, the best way to describe her feelings about herself would be inadequate. Still, she would not give up. Never. Her loyal supporters and vassals trusted her with their lives, and she would not let them down by despairing. The future was still uncertain. Only her own actions could determine what would become of her. Like her father had said, who does not try cannot win. If Tanya could swat the white whale out of the sky like a pesky fly, so what? What did that prove? Only that she would be a formidable opponent. Good. Only with an exceptional adversary would she herself be able to grow exceptional as well. If Tanya defeated the white whale, then Crush would just do something even more incredible. She would give her best and go beyond her limits. She would give everything she had for this kingdom and more. Because the people deserved it. So she took courage and steeled her soul. This temporary setback meant nothing. 2 years were a long time to surpass the other candidates. Through the power of determination she would prevail. Tanya, on the other hand, looked thoroughly disheveled. Wounds littered her entire body, and her clothes were literally dyed red from blood. It should not have pleased her, but inwardly Crush was relieved that the young girl had not come out of such a gargantuan battle unscathed. Such power would have been truly inconceivable. But the closer she looked, the more oddities became obvious. The countless cuts, for example, were too clean to be inflicted by a monstrosity like the whale. Indeed, they looked exactly like knife wounds. Also, her only weapon appeared to be cutlass of some sorts, which was strange. Well, the girl was a magician, a powerful one at that, but to win with only a rather short blade and magic. Thoughts for later. First she would inspect the corpse of the whale. Certainly this would teach her much about her powerful rival. Don't forget to like and subscribe to KUMO-AUDIOBOOK.